Hello there, and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, the place where curiosity curls up with comfort and the strangest corners of nature are turned into stories gentle enough to fall asleep to. Tonight, we're wandering somewhere darker than a midnight room with the lights turned off, darker even than the inside of a cave. We're going to the deep ocean, where sunlight never reaches, and yet something remarkable happens. A fish carrying a living light bulb swims through the abyss, dangling its lantern like an underwater streetlight in a neighbourhood of shadows. It's called the Anglerfish, and it looks like something straight out of a science fiction dream, or depending on your taste in fish, maybe a science fiction nightmare. But before we float downward into the darkness, let me ask you something. Where in the world are you right now? Are you in a city where glowing signs and headlights chase away the night? Or are you somewhere quiet where the dark feels more natural? Maybe it's late, and you're listening with the curtains drawn and a soft glow in your room. Or maybe it's still daylight for you, and the idea of this fish carrying its lantern feels even stranger because you're surrounded by brightness. Wherever you are, the funny thing is that we are about to talk about light in one of the darkest places on Earth, and somehow it connects to the same thing happening on your screen right now. This glow you're staring at. Light has a way of tying everything together, whether it's in the sky, in your home, or pulsing faintly from the forehead of a fish thousands of meters under the sea. If you find this little expedition relaxing, or if you enjoy sinking into these calm voyages through science and wonder, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave this video a like, or even subscribed. It helps this quiet corner reach others who might also need a peaceful moment of curiosity. And now, let's take a slow breath, let the day soften a little, and begin our descent into the abyss. Because the story of how the ocean created a living lantern is as strange as it is soothing. Imagine the surface of the sea first. It's a place of glitter and movement, waves catching the sun, reflections of clouds, the kind of brightness that makes you squint on a clear day. Just below, in the shallows, fish dart among corals, their colours bold and obvious because there's still light to reveal them. Dive deeper, past the coral gardens and the twilight zone, until the water grows dimmer and dimmer, until blue fades into black. At around 200 metres below the surface, sunlight struggles. By 1,000 metres, it disappears entirely. Below that point is the midnight zone, a stretch of ocean where the sun has never touched, not once in all of Earth's history. Down there the pressure is immense, the cold is constant, and yet life thrives. Not just any life, but some of the strangest forms you could imagine, and among them is the anglerfish. At first glance, it doesn't look like something nature designed with grace in mind. It's small, usually less than a foot long, though in imagination it often looms much larger. Its head is as smooth compared to its body, its mouth stretched into a cavern filled with long needle-like teeth, some pointing inward like a prison gate. Its eyes are small and glassy, suited for detecting the faintest flickers in the dark. But the most striking feature is the one that gives it its name. From the top of its head grows a thin, flexible stalk, ending in a fleshy bulb that glows. It waves this little lantern slowly back and forth, and in the endless night, that faint pulse of light becomes irresistible. If we pause the story here, you might already be asking how such a thing is possible. How does a fish grow a glowing lamp on its forehead? Why would light exist in a place that never sees the sun? And what does this say about life's creativity when faced with nothing but darkness and crushing silence? That's exactly what we're about to explore. But we won't rush there. We'll drift slowly, the way a diver adjusts to the pressure, because the deeper we go, the stranger it gets. Picture yourself in that darkness now, suspended in water so black you can't see your own hand if you were to stretch it out. There's no surface to look up at, no seabed beneath your feet, just open water. Around you, countless tiny organisms drift, most of them invisible to the eye, but some of them glowing faintly, pinpricks of blue-green light. These tiny sparks are the ocean's stars, created not by the sky, but by biology. This is bioluminescence, and it is the secret behind the anglerfish's lamp. Bioluminescence isn't like fire. It doesn't need heat. Instead, it comes from a chemical reaction where molecules in living cells interact to produce light. Many creatures can do this. Fireflies in the summer air, mushrooms on a forest floor, squids and jellyfish far below. But the deep sea is the world capital of bioluminescence. Down there, about 90% of creatures produce light in some form. Some use it to hide, glowing on their undersides so predators can't see their shadow against faint moonlight above. Others use it to send signals, flashes and pulses like Morse code in liquid form. But the anglerfish uses its light in a way few others do. It uses it as bait. The little bulb on its head is called the esker, and inside it live bacteria that produce the glow. This is the strange twist. The fish itself doesn't generate the light. It isn't a glowing creature by nature. Instead, it has formed a partnership with microscopic life. The bacteria live in the bulb, safe and fed, while in return they emit light. Think of it as the fish carrying a lantern filled with tenants, who pay rent not in money but in a faint blue gleam. Without those bacteria, the lure would be dark. With them, it becomes the perfect trap. A spark in the void where any small fish or shrimp drawn to curiosity might swim closer, only to find themselves in the jaws of something waiting patiently. That patience is part of the anglerfish's design. In the deep sea, energy is precious. Food doesn't come often. There's no plant life down there, no algae making sugar from sunlight. Everything must drift down from the surface. Bits of dead plankton, fish that didn't survive, fragments of organic matter sometimes called marine snow. So predators like the anglerfish can't afford to chase. They wait, motionless, blending into the black, their lure swaying like a small worm or tiny fish. To a hungry passerby it looks like an easy meal. But the meal is a trap, and the anglerfish's mouth can open wide enough to swallow prey nearly as large as itself. It doesn't need to chase when it can let the darkness do the hunting for it. Already, this raises a quiet marvel. Evolution has taken two separate beings, a fish and a colony of bacteria, and brought them into partnership, not through conscious agreement, but through countless generations of trial and error. At some point in deep time, bacteria capable of glowing found themselves inside the tissue of an early anglerfish ancestor, and instead of being destroyed, they were kept. The fish benefited from the glow, the bacteria from the protection, and over millions of years the relationship became permanent. Today, every anglerfish larva must find its own glowing tenants, drawing them in from the seawater because they aren't inherited from the parent. Imagine that. A newborn anglerfish hatches, drifts in the open ocean, and must somehow attract the right kind of microscopic lodgers to take up residence in its lantern. Without them, its lure stays dark, and in the deep sea, darkness can mean death. And yet, despite the harshness of this world, the system works. The anglerfish glows, waits, and survives. It's easy to see why people might look at such a creature and call it terrifying. Sharp teeth, a ghostly glow, a mouth ready to consume anything that wanders close. But in another light, it's not terrifying at all. It's ingenious. It's the ocean finding a way to paint with light when no sunlight shines. Now that we've met this odd lantern bearer, we're going to keep drifting with it through the abyss, letting its glow guide us to deeper questions. How does the lure function in such perfect harmony with its host? Why is light such a common trick in the deep when energy is so scarce? And what does this strange little creature tell us about survival in the most extreme corners of Earth? The answers will come, but slowly, like the gentle swaying of a lure in the current. When you think about the ocean, chances are the image that comes to mind is the surface. Waves rolling gently or crashing loudly depending on the weather, gulls flying overhead, sunlight bouncing off ripples and scattering into sparkles that make you squint. Maybe you imagine standing on the shore with your toes in the sand, watching the horizon where the sea meets the sky. That is the ocean most of us know. Bright, alive, loud, sometimes chaotic. But this is only the thinnest skin of a world that covers most of our planet. Beneath it lies a realm so vast and so foreign that it might as well be another planet altogether, and that is where the anglerfish lives. As we descend, let's take it slowly. Imagine yourself slipping below the surface, the sunlight above gradually softening. At first, it is still bright. You can look around and see fish darting in schools, corals waving like gardens, sea turtles gliding past like underwater kites. It feels familiar in its strangeness because documentaries and aquariums have shown us these scenes again and again. But keep going. Past the first 30 metres and already the colours begin to fade. Reds vanish first, then oranges, then yellows. The water filters light like a tinted glass, leaving behind only the blues and greens. By 100 metres down, the surface above looks like a pale ceiling. The world around you is dimmer, quieter, colder. By 200 metres, you enter what scientists call the twilight zone. It isn't fully dark yet, but the sun is fading fast. This zone stretches down to about 1,000 metres, and it is here that strange transformations begin. Fish here often have big eyes, wider than you'd expect for their bodies, because they need to squeeze every last photon out of the dim light that remains. Many are silver or transparent to avoid being seen at all. Predators lurk with upward-pointing eyes, waiting to catch the silhouettes of prey swimming above them. It is a world of long shadows and careful disguises, where visibility is already a rare commodity. Keep descending, and the last traces of sunlight finally vanish. At 1,000 metres and deeper, there is only night. This is the midnight zone, and it is where most anglerfish species make their homes. Here, the pressure is immense. Imagine the weight of 50 jumbo jets stacked on your body. That is the kind of crushing force these waters impose. Temperatures hover near freezing. Not the icy 0 degrees of frozen lakes, but a steady 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, which for life without heating systems feels like eternal winter. And above all, there is no sunlight, not even a faint shimmer. If you turned off a flashlight in this environment, you would not see your hand even if you pressed it against your face. You would not see the bubbles leaving your lips. Darkness here is not an absence of light. It is the default condition, the permanent rule of existence. And yet, life thrives. The abyss is not empty. It is crowded with creatures adapted to conditions that seem impossible. Giant squid with eyes the size of dinner plates patrol the depths. Gelatinous beings drift like living ghosts. Tiny plankton pulse with faint blue sparks. Each flash a signal, a lure, or sometimes a warning. Fish here are shaped by scarcity. Many are small and fragile, conserving energy. Others grow mouths disproportionately large for their bodies, so that if food comes by, they can swallow it regardless of size. Stomachs stretch, jaws unhinge, because one lucky meal might need to last weeks or even months. The anglerfish fits right into this ecosystem. To us it looks monstrous, with its gaping teeth and eerie glow, but in context, it is perfectly logical. In the abyss, efficiency is everything. If you can't chase, you must trick. If you can't rely on eyesight, you must invent another strategy. That is exactly what the anglerfish has done. It is not fast, it is not graceful, and it is not strong compared to other fish. But it is clever in its design. It turns the pitch-black waters into a hunting ground by carrying its own light source. The lure becomes both a signal and a snare. Small creatures looking for food notice the glow. They approach cautiously, sometimes circling, trying to decide whether the light is friend or foe. The anglerfish waits, motionless, its body blending into the dark, teeth hidden until the final moment. And when the prey drifts close enough, The jaws snap shut, and the light continues swaying as if nothing happened. The deeper you think about this, the more remarkable it becomes. On land, darkness is something temporary. Night falls, but morning returns. A cave may be dark, but step outside and the sun is waiting. In the ocean's abyss, there is no morning, no cave exit. It has been night for millions of years, uninterrupted, complete. For life to adapt here, it had to do one of two things: either embrace the dark and evolve senses other than sight, or create light of its own. The anglerfish chose the latter. Its lantern is not a decoration. It is a survival tool born from relentless necessity. Now, consider the environment itself. The midnight zone is vast, covering more of Earth's surface than all the land put together. If you were to map the globe, most of it would not be mountains or forests or cities. Most of it would be this endless black water. And in that water, light is rare enough to be precious. A faint glow, even one produced by bacteria in a fish's lure, becomes a beacon. For tiny shrimp and small fish drifting in darkness, it is almost irresistible. The promise of food or the curiosity of something unusual draws them in. Nature exploits curiosity as much as hunger. The anglerfish knows nothing of this in human terms, but its body has been sculpted to use the principle. Wait quietly, glow faintly, let the darkness do the rest. But before we get carried away with the image of a single glowing fish in endless dark, pause for a moment. Imagine the sensory experience of being here. The silence is not absolute because water carries sound far, but it is different from anything we know. A distant crack may come from shifting ice above, hundreds of kilometers away, carried down as a faint boom. The snap of a shrimp claw might echo strangely in the pressure. Your own breathing would seem loud, intrusive even against the calm. The darkness is so complete that your eyes would strain against it, inventing shapes that aren't there. And then suddenly a tiny flicker, a pulse of blue-green light ahead. It might vanish, or it might repeat, drawing you in. You would never know until you were close whether it was harmless plankton, a fellow glowing traveller, or the lure of something waiting with open jaws. That is the kind of uncertainty every creature in the abyss lives with. The anglerfish is only one example of how life copes here. Many creatures use bioluminescence differently. Some squirt glowing liquid as a distraction, like a luminous smokescreen. Others flash patterns to communicate, signals of recognition or warnings to predators. But the anglerfish uses its glow to blur the line between predator and prey. Its lure is small and inviting, a trick designed not to alarm but to tempt. In an environment where meals are scarce, temptation is powerful. That faint swaying glow is enough to bring the unwary closer, and the abyss itself hides the danger until it is too late. The abyss is often described as alien, and in a sense it is. The conditions down here resemble environments we might expect on distant moons like Europa or Enceladus, where ice covers oceans kept liquid by heat from below. If life exists there, it may look more like anglerfish and glowing plankton than dolphins or whales. Studying the abyss is therefore not just about understanding our own planet. It is also about imagining what life elsewhere could be. The anglerfish, with its living light bulb, might be less of a monster and more of a preview, a hint of how evolution works in the shadows. And yet, for all its strangeness, there is something oddly comforting about the abyss. It reminds us that life does not give up easily. No matter how dark, how cold, how heavy the pressure, biology finds a way to survive. In some places it thrives. The anglerfish is a perfect example of this stubborn resilience. It is not elegant, it is not pretty, but it works. Its glow is proof that even in a world without sun there can still be light. And so, as we drift deeper with it, the question grows stronger. How exactly does that glow come to be? What is happening inside the tiny lantern to produce light without heat, without fire, without electricity as we know it? And how did evolution, blind and slow, stumble upon such an extraordinary trick? The abyss is not quick to give answers, but if we follow carefully, the anglerfish will show us. If the abyss is a stage built entirely of darkness, then the first appearance of light down there must have been like a miracle. Not the kind of miracle shouted about in myths or carved into stone, but a quiet one, a subtle glow at the edge of nothingness. It's easy for us to take light for granted. The sun rises every morning, lamps flick on at the touch of a switch, screens glow in our hands without us giving them a second thought. But in the deep sea, where no sunrise has ever reached, light is not just rare, it is a revelation. The first flicker of it would have been enough to change everything about how life was lived. To understand just how strange this is, think about what light usually means in nature. For plants on land, light is food. They convert it into sugar, building entire ecosystems around its steady flow. For animals, light is vision, a way of navigating and recognizing one another, a way of hunting and hiding. On the surface world, everything we do depends on light in some way, and so we almost forget that it can vanish. But the ocean reminds us. It swallows light with ruthless efficiency. At only a few meters, colours fade. At a few hundred, brightness turns into gloom. Beyond 1,000, nothing remains. And yet, somehow, life invented a way to bring light back into that world. The earliest flickers of bioluminescence probably didn't look like much. Maybe just a faint glow in plankton, so dim it could barely be noticed. The origin story is still debated, but most scientists agree it began as a chemical accident. Within certain organisms, reactions between molecules happen to release energy in the form of photons. It wasn't planned, it wasn't engineered, it was simply chemistry. But that small accident proved useful. A glow could startle a predator, confuse it for just long enough to let prey escape, or it could attract another creature, serving as bait. Over time, natural selection took hold. Those with the ability to glow gained an advantage, survived a little longer, reproduced a little more, and the glow became stronger. What started as a chemical quirk became a survival strategy, and eventually, an entire language of light evolved in the darkness. Now imagine how it must have looked from the perspective of the first animals to see it. You're a small fish drifting in absolute blackness, guided only by pressure, by faint vibrations in the water, maybe by smell. You've never seen light before because down here there is none. And then one night, if you can even call it night, something flashes ahead. A brief blue pulse, a faint shimmer. It doesn't last long, but it is unlike anything you've experienced. Instinct kicks in, and you either swim toward it in curiosity or dart away in fear. Either way, your world has changed. Darkness is no longer perfect. It has been pierced. For us, these glows are faint. Most deep-sea bioluminescence shines in blue-green wavelengths, the colours that travel farthest in water. It isn't dazzling like fireworks. It isn't warm like fire. It's a cool, ghostly glow, often pulsing in patterns or flickering just long enough to be noticed. To a human diver with a light turned off, these signals would look like stars scattered through the water, sometimes moving, sometimes fading, sometimes exploding into sudden brightness. But unlike stars, these lights are alive. They are made of cells, fueled by chemistry, woven into the fabric of living creatures. And that makes them not just beautiful, but functional. The anglerfish's lantern is one of the most famous examples, but it didn't appear in isolation. It is part of a much bigger story about how the deep sea learned to glow. Fireflies on land have a compound called luciferin that produces light when mixed with oxygen. Many marine creatures have evolved their own versions of luciferin, along with enzymes called luciferases that make the reaction efficient. Some even produce light with the help of tiny crystalline structures that focus and direct the glow, like biological spotlights. What is striking is that bioluminescence has evolved independently dozens of times in Earth's history. It isn't the product of one lucky invention passed along, but a trick nature keeps rediscovering again and again because it is so useful. But why here, in the deep sea, has it become so dominant? On land, very few creatures glow, and those that do are curiosities. In the abyss, nearly everything glows in some way. The answer is simple. When the world is pure darkness, even a tiny flicker of light changes the rules. It can reveal a predator, hide a shadow, attract a mate, lure prey, or send a message. In a way, it's not so different from how early humans gathered around fire. Fire gave warmth, safety, a gathering point, and a tool for hunting. Bioluminescence gives those same advantages in the deep. It is fire without heat, light without flame, civilization built from molecules rather than sparks. The anglerfish is part of this long story, but it uses the glow differently than most. Its light is not just a warning or a distraction, it is bait, and that makes it unique. It doesn't want to repel or confuse, it wants to seduce, to draw creatures closer, and then end the story with a sudden snap of its jaws. To us this seems almost cruel, but in the abyss, cruelty is not the right word. There are no villains or heroes, there is only survival, and survival favours creativity. A light bulb on the end of a fish's forehead might sound absurd, but it works, and that is all evolution ever cares about. Think about what it means to have this relationship with light. On land, we humans think of light as something external. We rely on the sun, on lamps, on fire. We don't generate light from within our bodies. If you were to glow in the dark, people would think it was supernatural. But in the abyss, glowing is normal. It is the rule rather than the exception. To many deep-sea creatures, a world without light would seem incomplete, not because they remember sunlight, but because their own bodies have learned to paint the darkness. The anglerfish's bulb is just one canvas in this ocean-wide gallery. Now pause for a moment and picture that glow. Imagine it swaying back and forth at the end of a thin stalk, moving gently with the current. The fish itself is nearly invisible, its dark body blending with the water, its teeth hidden in shadow. All you see is the bulb, a small steady light. To another creature drifting nearby it might look like food, to us it looks like a lantern. In both cases it is something extraordinary, a living source of light in a world without stars. That glow is not just functional, it is beautiful in its own way, not because it was designed to be, but because we humans can't help but find beauty in any flame that brightens the dark. And it is this first flicker of light that changes the abyss from an empty void into a theatre. Without it, the midnight zone would be a uniform black, lifeless to our eyes. With it, the stage is set. Creatures play their roles, signalling, hunting, hiding, deceiving, and surviving. Light becomes language. It becomes camouflage. It becomes a weapon. It becomes everything. And in the anglerfish, it becomes a trick so perfect that it has kept this odd little predator alive for millions of years. But there is more to the story than just the glow itself. Where does it come from exactly? How does the fish, which cannot produce light on its own, end up carrying a lamp that never burns out? The secret lies in the partnership it forms with bacteria, and the details of that strange arrangement will take us deeper still into the abyss's mysteries. But for now, hold on to the image of that glow, faint but steady, swaying in the current, a reminder that even in the places where light should never exist, life always finds a way to create it. The light in the abyss draws our attention first, but sooner or later the glow reveals its owner, and this is the moment when many people recoil. The anglerfish is not a graceful creature, not in the way dolphins arc out of waves or in the way reef fish shimmer with colours. It doesn't charm with elegance, it startles with strangeness. Some people, on seeing it for the first time, have even called it grotesque, as though it were a monster that stumbled out of a storybook rather than something real. But take a moment, because what at first seems monstrous often becomes fascinating the longer you look. An anglerfish's most striking feature is its head. Compared to the rest of its body, it looks oversized, swollen like it grew too fast for the frame supporting it. The mouth stretches wide, curving in a perpetual scowl filled with teeth that look like needles. Unlike human teeth that stop neatly in rows, anglerfish teeth seem to jut out in uneven directions, long enough that in some species the upper and lower jaws can't even close completely. They overlap like bars of a cage, ensuring that once something enters it cannot escape. Their eyes are small, unblinking and glassy, not the commanding kind you might expect of a predator, but quiet orbs built to catch the barest shimmer of movement. Then there is the body itself, small compared to the head, often soft and flabby. These fish are not built for speed. They do not chase, they drift, they wait. Their flesh is less dense than that of shallow water fish, allowing them to hover without much effort, conserving the energy they cannot afford to waste. To a human observer, the body may look incomplete, almost like a rough draft of a fish that nature forgot to finish polishing. But what looks unfinished is in fact deliberate. There is no need for speed when you are an ambush hunter, no need for streamlined elegance when your prey delivers itself to your jaws. But above everything else is the feature that makes them famous: the lure. It extends from the top of the head, a thin filament ending in the glowing bulb, the esker. In some species the filament is short, swaying close to the mouth. In others it is long and flexible, dangling like a fishing rod, which is how the fish got its name. It is this lantern that defines the anglerfish, the reason it is instantly recognizable even to people who have never seen one in the wild. A fish carrying its own lamp seems like something invented for a story, but here it is, alive in the deepest parts of the sea. There are many kinds of anglerfish, over 200 species scattered across oceans around the world. Some live in shallower waters, but the ones most often associated with that eerie glow are from the deep sea groups. And even within them, variety exists. Some are only a few centimetres long, barely bigger than your thumb. Others reach more than a metre, though those are rare. Their appearances shift slightly from species to species. Some with skin that looks warty, others smoother. Some with longer lures, others with shorter stubby ones. Some with bodies so fragile they would fall apart if brought quickly to the surface. Yet all of them share the same basic plan: a large head, sharp teeth, and a light on a stick. Seeing them for the first time often makes people laugh nervously or recoil. Their teeth seem exaggerated, their proportions strange. But remember, in the abyss, survival doesn't reward beauty in the human sense, it rewards effectiveness. An anglerfish looks exactly the way it must to thrive where it does. Every tooth is a hook to keep prey from slipping out. Every inch of flabby flesh is a strategy to save energy. Every faint glow of the esker is an invitation to creatures that cannot resist light in the dark. If it seems strange to us, it is only because we are surface dwellers, used to sunlight and bright colours. In the abyss, the anglerfish is not strange. It is perfectly ordinary, perfectly adapted. And yet, despite that ordinary perfection, it has managed to grip our imagination more than most sea creatures. Part of this is the look, yes, but part of it is the feeling it creates. Imagine being alone in darkness and seeing only a small lantern ahead of you. You swim closer, curious, comforted even, and then suddenly realise it belongs to a face of teeth and a mouth that opens wider than seems possible. That sudden flip from light to danger plays on a deep instinct in us. It is the same tension found in ghost stories, where a flicker of a candle reveals something waiting in the shadows. The anglerfish has become, unintentionally, a natural ghost story of the sea. But instead of thinking of it as a monster, try to see it as a portrait of ingenuity. It doesn't race after its prey, it doesn't waste strength, it waits, it tempts, it survives. It uses bacteria it cannot see and barely controls to shine its lure. It lives in a place where almost nothing else could. That is not monstrous. That is remarkable. When researchers first brought specimens up from the depths, many were damaged by the change in pressure. Their bodies, adapted to the weight of kilometres of water, often collapsed or burst when brought to the surface. This only added to their eerie reputation. Imagine finding a creature with a light on its forehead, fragile as wet tissue, mouth full of knives floating up from a net. To scientists, though, they were puzzles. How could something so fragile and so odd be thriving in an environment that seemed so hostile? The answer lay not in brute force, but in subtle tricks, in the lure and impatience. One detail often overlooked is how the anglerfish moves. It does not dart like a tuna or soar like a manta ray. Instead, it drifts, fins spreading slowly, body swaying slightly in the current. If you were watching one in the wild, you might think it wasn't moving at all, just a dark shape hanging in the water. That stillness is its weapon. In a world without solid ground, where everything drifts, stillness is invisibility. Only the lure moves, hypnotically, softly. The rest of the body becomes part of the background. It is like a stage magician distracting you with one hand while the other prepares the trick. Your eyes lock on the light, never noticing the jaws that wait just behind it. This reliance on stillness and trickery rather than speed and strength sets the anglerfish apart. Many predators in the ocean chase and overpower. Sharks, for instance, rely on bursts of speed and sharp senses. Squid use jets of water to dart at their prey. The anglerfish is the opposite. It is the patient predator, letting the abyss do the work, letting the curiosity of other creatures bring them closer. It's a reminder that in evolution there is no single path to success. You can be fast, or you can be clever. The anglerfish chose clever. And then there is the size difference between males and females, a detail that makes the species even stranger in human eyes. In many deep-sea anglerfish species, the females are the ones with the large bodies, the massive mouths, and the glowing lures. The males are tiny, sometimes only a fraction of the female's size, almost comically small in comparison. They do not have lures, they do not hunt in the same way. Instead, their role is to find a female, attach themselves, and in some species fuse with her body. They provide sperm, she provides everything else. This bizarre arrangement adds another layer to the anglerfish's reputation for weirdness, but it also shows just how far adaptation can go in a place where finding a mate might be as rare as finding a meal. For now, though, focus on the image of the female anglerfish, lantern swaying, teeth gleaming faintly when the light catches them, body blending into the abyss. That is the creature we are meeting, not a monster, not a mistake. A fish shaped by pressures we can barely imagine, pressures not just of water but of scarcity, of darkness, of survival. It is easy to laugh at its appearance. It is harder but more rewarding to see the ingenuity in it. And so, as we let that glow guide us deeper into its world, the questions begin to shift. If this fish relies on its lantern so completely, what exactly is happening inside that bulb? How does it work, and why does it glow so steadily in the first place? The answer, as strange as the fish itself, is that the lantern is not truly its own. It belongs as much to bacteria as to the anglerfish, and that story of borrowed light is the next step in our journey. The glow is the first thing we notice, swaying softly in the dark, but the closer we look, the more fascinating it becomes. At first glance, it might seem like a natural flashlight, something the fish itself produces with a special organ. After all, many animals have glands or features that secrete useful chemicals or produce colours. But in the case of the anglerfish, the lantern it carries is not entirely its own creation. It is a partnership, one of the strangest in the animal kingdom. That small bulb dangling above its mouth is a home, and the tenants inside it are not fish cells but bacteria. This structure is called the esker, a fleshy growth that varies in shape depending on the species. In some anglerfish it looks like a tiny glowing pearl. In others it's shaped like a worm or even has tendrils that sway in the current, imitating prey more convincingly. At its simplest, it is just a bulb. At its most elaborate, it is a puppet dangling on a string. But what all of them have in common is that they shine with light that does not belong to the fish itself. Inside the tissue of the esker lives a colony of symbiotic bacteria, and it is these microscopic lodgers that produce the glow. The anglerfish has essentially outsourced its lantern to another species, relying on them to keep its lure bright. That raises an immediate question. Why would bacteria glow at all? For them, light is not food or vision, is not something they need to survive. The leading explanation is that glowing is a byproduct of their metabolism, a way of releasing excess energy. Some bacteria do it freely in the ocean, casting faint sparks into the water. But inside the anglerfish's esker, the light becomes concentrated, visible from meters away. The fish provides the bacteria with shelter and nutrients. The bacteria, in turn, provide the glow. Neither survives the same way without the other. It is easy to overlook how strange this is. A fish and a bacterium are separated by billions of years of evolution. They speak no common language, share no intentions, and yet, somehow, they have found a way to live as one, forming a biological partnership so close it looks like a single creature. When you see an anglerfish's lantern swaying in the abyss, you're not really seeing one animal. You're seeing two lives woven together, two species overlapping, each depending on the other for survival. It is not collaboration as we humans imagine it. It is not planned. But it works. And because it works, it has been preserved by evolution. There is another curious twist. Anglerfish do not pass these glowing bacteria directly to their offspring. When a female lays her eggs, the larvae that hatch do not automatically have lanterns full of light. The bulb is there, yes, but it is empty. The young fish must recruit the bacteria from the environment. That means somewhere in the vast ocean, free-living relatives of these symbiotic bacteria drift, invisible to us, waiting to find a home. A young anglerfish must somehow capture them and coax them inside its esker. Only then does the lantern ignite. Without them, the lure remains dark, and in the deep sea a dark lure is almost useless. Think of how precarious this seems. A larva, barely larger than a fingernail clipping, floating in endless black water, must stumble upon exactly the right microbes and persuade them to stay. The odds feel impossible, like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach, and yet it happens reliably enough for the species to thrive. The fact that it works at all is a quiet miracle of biology. We do not yet know precisely how the fish attracts these bacteria. Some scientists suggest chemical signals. Others believe the tissue of the esker is specially adapted to welcome only certain strains, creating a kind of lock and key system. However it works, the result is a lantern that lights up again and again across generations, carried faithfully into the abyss. From a practical perspective, the light they produce is efficient. Bioluminescence does not waste energy the way fire or electricity does. It produces almost no heat, which is important in an environment where every calorie counts. The anglerfish cannot afford luxuries. It cannot waste food or energy. The bacteria's glow is the perfect compromise. Bright enough to lure prey, cheap enough to sustain. And because it comes from an external colony, the fish doesn't need to manage the complex chemistry itself. It provides a home and nourishment, and the bacteria do the rest. Outsourcing in this case becomes survival. The glow itself varies. In some species it is constant, a steady lantern burning in the dark. In others the fish can dim or brighten it, sometimes even switching it off altogether by contracting muscles or moving pigment cells around the esker. This gives the anglerfish control over its bait, letting it pulse like a worm in distress, or vanish entirely if danger approaches. Imagine being a small creature in the abyss, swimming through black water, and suddenly a glow appears ahead, bobbing gently. It looks like food. It looks irresistible. You drift closer and closer still, unaware that you are approaching not a snack but a trap. The design is chilling, but it is also elegant. In the abyss, prey cannot afford to ignore light. It may be a meal, it may be a mate, it may be the only signal for miles around. Curiosity and hunger outweigh caution. The anglerfish relies on this, dangling its lantern with infinite patience, waiting for curiosity to kill the shrimp. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this lantern is not how it works, but what it represents. It is a reminder that survival often depends not on competition, but on cooperation. In school biology lessons, we're taught that evolution is about the survival of the fittest, the strongest overcoming the weak. But in truth, survival is just as often about partnerships. Coral reefs exist because corals house algae inside their tissues. Termites digest wood only because bacteria and protozoa in their guts do the work. Humans themselves rely on trillions of microbes in our intestines to break down food. The anglerfish is simply another example, though one made visible in a glowing lamp. Its survival is literally lit by cooperation, and it is this detail that makes the anglerfish's lantern so compelling. It is not simply a flashlight attached to a predator. It is a living relationship, a home for bacteria, a symbol of how life bends the rules to keep going. When we imagine monsters of the deep, we often think of them as solitary, ruthless. But the anglerfish is, in a strange way, never alone. Its lantern is filled with life, a colony that shines quietly, day after day, in a place where day never comes. Now picture it again. A female anglerfish floats in the dark, invisible except for the glow above her mouth. The esker sways like a tiny beacon, powered by the unseen tenants inside. Around her, the water is silent, cold, and infinite. But that light makes her visible, not only to us but to every creature nearby. It is her signal, her trick, her survival, and in that glow lies the story of how the abyss itself learned to carry a lantern. From here, our curiosity naturally turns to the history of this strange partnership. How did a fish and bacteria, so different and so distant on the tree of life, come together to create something so effective? Evolution does not plan, but somehow it has sculpted this alliance. The deeper we look into that history, the stranger and more fascinating the story becomes. The lantern of the anglerfish may seem like a permanent part of its body, as if it were grown and maintained by the fish itself. But the truth is stranger. The glow it carries is not its own. It is borrowed light, given by organisms so small we cannot see them, yet powerful enough to turn the abyss into a hunting ground. This is the part of the story where the anglerfish becomes less of a lone predator and more of a community. Because the lantern is not just a feature, it is a home filled with life that does not belong to the fish at all. The bacteria inside the esker are symbiotic partners, meaning they live in close association with the fish and both benefit from the arrangement. For the anglerfish, the benefit is obvious, light in a place that has none. For the bacteria, the benefit is subtler but just as important. In the endless open water of the deep sea, resources are scarce. Food drifts down slowly from the surface in the form of marine snow, but much of it is consumed before it ever reaches these depths. For bacteria floating freely, survival is uncertain, energy hard to come by. But inside the anglerfish's lure, the story changes. The fish provides a steady stream of nutrients, a sheltered environment, a protected space in which to thrive. In exchange, the bacteria glow, producing a light the fish cannot make on its own. What makes this even more remarkable is that the fish and the bacteria are not born together. When a female anglerfish hatches, her body is equipped with the esker, the lantern structure, but it is empty. There are no bacteria inside yet. It is like a lamp without a bulb, a lantern with no flame. The young anglerfish must somehow find the right bacteria in the surrounding seawater and invite them in. Only then does the light appear. Only then does the lantern come alive. This process is not fully understood, but scientists believe the tissue of the esker secretes specific chemicals that attract the correct species of bacteria, drawing them in like a scent trail. Once they arrive, the esker provides them with the conditions they need to survive: nutrients, oxygen, and protection. Not every microbe can enter. The tissue seems to act like a selective filter, allowing only certain strains to colonize the bulb. This ensures the fish does not end up filled with freeloaders that consume food but give nothing back. Only those bacteria capable of bioluminescence are welcomed, and once they take up residence, the lantern ignites. It is hard to imagine the odds of this working. The ocean is unimaginably vast. A larval anglerfish is tiny, almost invisible in the expanse of water. The bacteria it needs are microscopic, drifting freely, scattered thinly. And yet somehow they find one another. Somehow, again and again, across generations the lamp is lit. The very survival of the species depends on this reunion, and still it happens. It is as if the abyss itself conspires to keep the lantern glowing. From our perspective, this is extraordinary, because it reveals something fundamental about survival. We often think of creatures as self-contained, each one complete on its own. But many are not. They are mosaics of partnerships, dependent on relationships with other forms of life. Corals house algae. Cows and humans alike depend on gut microbes. Termites can only digest wood because of the organisms in their stomachs. And the anglerfish depends on bacteria for light. Life is not a series of individuals competing. It is a web of partnerships, some temporary, some so permanent they look like single organisms. The anglerfish reminds us of this truth every time its lure flickers on. Borrowed light also raises another puzzle. Why should bacteria glow in the first place? For them, producing light costs energy that could be spent on growth or reproduction. At first glance, glowing seems like a waste. But here is where the partnership turns the equation. Inside the esker, the bacteria are fed and sheltered. They can afford the cost of light, and by glowing they keep their place in the relationship. If they stopped shining, they might be outcompeted by other strains, replaced by bacteria willing to pay the rent. The glow is their ticket to survival. There is also evidence that in the wild the relationship is exclusive. The strains of bacteria found inside anglerfish lanterns are not typically found anywhere else. They have become specialists, evolved to live only in this tiny glowing niche. For them, the anglerfish is not just a partner, it is home. They are so well adapted to it that outside the esker they rarely survive. In this sense, the fish and the bacteria have become almost inseparable, their fates tied together by evolution. The phrase borrowed light captures this beautifully. The fish does not make it, but it relies on it completely. The bacteria provide it, but only because the fish shelters them. Neither could shine alone. Together they create something neither could achieve on its own. That is the essence of symbiosis, and it is written into the very glow that hangs over the anglerfish's mouth. Now imagine the scene again. In the darkness of the abyss, a small glow appears, steady and soft. To us, it is just light. To the anglerfish, it is survival. And to the bacteria, it is home. What we see as a simple lantern is in truth a living collaboration, a story of two species sharing one signal in the dark. Every flicker of the esker is a reminder that survival often means borrowing, depending, connecting. And yet, the anglerfish wields this borrowed glow as if it were entirely its own. To the prey approaching, it does not matter where the light originates. It does not matter that the glow belongs to bacteria. What matters is that it shines, that it lures, that it leads them close. The distinction between fish and microbes blurs. To an outsider, they are one. And maybe that is the deeper truth. In the abyss, partnerships like this are not exceptions. They are the rule. The story of borrowed light also nudges us to think about our own lives differently. We humans do not glow in the dark, but we too carry partnerships within us. Trillions of microbes line our guts, shape our immune systems, influence our health. Without them, we would not digest, not fight disease, not live as we do. The anglerfish's lantern is a dramatic reminder of something that is just as true for us. We are not solitary. We are ecosystems. We are communities of species stitched together by necessity. And sometimes, out of that necessity comes something remarkable, like a glow in the dark. So the next time you imagine the anglerfish drifting in the abyss, picture the esker not as a single organ, but as a tiny city. Inside, countless bacteria pulse with chemical energy, producing photons, each one a flicker in the black. Together they form a beacon that defines the fish's entire life. The anglerfish provides the house. The bacteria keep the lights on. It is, quite literally, a case of borrowed light. And as strange as this arrangement seems, it has worked for millions of years. The abyss has been dark for as long as the ocean has existed, but the lantern has stayed lit. The anglerfish drifts, waits, feeds, survives, all because of the glow it does not make but depends on completely. There is a kind of poetry in that, even if the abyss itself never cares. Life, after all, doesn't need to care, it only needs to endure. And borrowed light is one of the many ways it does. From here, the natural question is how such an improbable partnership could have evolved in the first place. How did a fish and a bacterium separated by such distance on the tree of life become so tightly bound? The story of that evolutionary trick, slow and blind yet astonishingly creative, is where our journey will drift next. If you hold the image of an anglerfish in your mind, with its glowing lure swaying patiently in the abyss, the first thing to realise is that nothing about it was planned. Evolution does not sit down with a blueprint and decide that a fish should grow a headlamp powered by bacteria. There was no committee meeting of nature where a design was sketched out, tested and then implemented. Evolution works by accident, by tiny changes that either happen to help or happen to vanish. The anglerfish's lantern, as strange and sophisticated as it seems, is the result of countless little accidents that piled up over millions of years until something extraordinary emerged. To us, the partnership between fish and bacteria looks like magic. But if you follow it backward, piece by piece, you start to see how something so bizarre could have come about. Somewhere in the distant past, before anglerfish had lanterns, before their mouths were filled with those needles of teeth, there were small fish living deeper than most others. They were not built for sunlight or reefs. They had already started drifting into darker waters, places where food was scarcer and the pressure was higher. Down there, some of them carried bacteria on their skin or in their guts, the way almost every creature does. These bacteria glowed faintly, perhaps as a quirk of their metabolism. Most of the time, this glow was irrelevant. But imagine a moment where it mattered. A faint shimmer might have startled a predator just long enough for the fish to slip away. Or maybe that glow attracted a smaller creature close enough to be eaten. If even one fish benefited from having these glowing bacteria nearby, that was enough. That fish survived a little longer, reproduced, and passed along the tendency to tolerate or attract glowing microbes. Over countless generations, the relationship deepened. The fish that developed small, fleshy outgrowths, little pouches or bulges where bacteria could collect, had an advantage. The bacteria thrived in those pockets, producing more light. The fish with slightly more effective pouches survived better. Slowly, generation by generation, those pouches evolved into the esker, the lantern bulb we see today. It was not sudden. It was not miraculous. It was slow, blind trial and error, shaped only by the rule that what works stays and what doesn't disappears. The stalk that holds the lantern, called the elysium, may have begun as a modified dorsal spine. Fish have rows of spines along their backs for stability. In anglerfish ancestors, one of those spines elongated and grew flexible. By chance, it could wiggle in the current. By chance, it looked a little like a worm. That slight resemblance, combined with the glow of bacteria, became deadly effective. Prey approached it out of curiosity, and the fish snapped them up. Once again, the accident was rewarded. Once again, the trait was passed on. Over millions of years, the dorsal spine became a fishing rod, the bulb became a glowing lure, and the anglerfish became the living light bulb of the sea. The trick of evolution is that it doesn't need foresight. It doesn't know what it is building. It doesn't aim for perfection. It only preserves what works in the moment. The anglerfish is not designed. It is cobbled together from useful accidents, each one layered on the last until something that looks like design emerges. The bacteria were not recruited intentionally. They happened to glow, happened to survive inside the fish's tissue, and happened to be useful. The fish didn't know what a lure was. It only happened to wiggle its spine, and that wiggle happened to tempt prey. Together, those accidents formed a system so effective that it has lasted for tens of millions of years. This is what makes evolution feel like magic to us. We see the finished lantern, neat and tidy, and we imagine it must have been crafted deliberately. But what we're seeing is the end product of countless tiny steps, each one so small it barely mattered at the time, and yet, when you add them up, you get a fish carrying a lamp. That is the trick. Evolution creates the illusion of intention without ever having any. What makes the anglerfish's case especially fascinating is that it shows how evolution can borrow. The fish itself never evolved the ability to make light. Instead, it outsourced the task to microbes. This is not unusual in biology. Many creatures rely on bacteria to do the heavy lifting, but in the case of the anglerfish, the borrowing is visible. It is not hidden in a gut or a cell. It dangles above the mouth, shining openly in the abyss. It is a reminder that survival often means using what is available, even if it seems unlikely. Think of how unlikely this truly is. A fish that cannot glow meets bacteria that can. By chance, the bacteria survive in a tissue pouch. By chance, the fish tolerates them. By chance, the glow proves useful. Multiply that by countless generations, and what was once a coincidence becomes an inseparable relationship. That is the evolutionary trick at its core, taking accidents and making them inevitable. There is also something humbling about this story. We humans tend to think of intelligence and planning as the pinnacle of problem solving. But the abyss shows us that mindless trial and error can produce marvels just as impressive. No one designed the anglerfish's lantern, yet it functions as if it were designed, precise and effective. That is the beauty of evolution's trick. It doesn't need to know the destination to create something extraordinary. And this trick is not limited to the anglerfish. Fireflies on land, squid in the ocean, even some mushrooms in forests, all have stumbled into bioluminescence by different routes. Each time, evolution has played the same game. A random chemical quirk becomes slightly useful, and usefulness keeps it alive. The anglerfish simply pushed the game further, combining its glow with a lure, turning light into bait. It is the difference between carrying a flashlight and using that flashlight to trick someone closer. A small change, but in the abyss, small changes are everything. Picture the process unfolding over millions of years. Early fish with no lanterns hunting clumsily in the dark. A few with glowing bacteria clinging to their skin, catching slightly more prey. A few with small fleshy bumps where the bacteria gathered glowing brighter. A few with flexible spines above their heads, wiggling like worms. Step by step, accident by accident, the pieces come together. Until one day, in the abyss, there is a fish with a glowing lure dangling above its jaws, waiting patiently for something hungry enough or curious enough to swim close. No step alone seems miraculous, but the whole picture looks like magic. That is why the anglerfish is such a compelling example of evolution's creativity. It looks improbable, almost impossible, until you see the path laid out in tiny increments. Then you realize it is not impossible at all. It is inevitable, given enough time and enough accidents. Evolution's trick is patience. The abyss has been dark for millions of years. That gave life all the time it needed to try, fail, and try again until something worked. And once it worked, once the lantern proved effective, it never went away. Now when we see the anglerfish glowing in documentaries or in illustrations, it feels like an alien invention, something too strange for Earth. But it is nothing more than a long series of ordinary steps, stacked one on another until the extraordinary appeared. That is the true trick of evolution, to make the improbable look inevitable, and to make the inevitable look designed. And so, When you think of the anglerfish waiting in the abyss, its borrowed light shining above its jaws, remember that it is not just a predator with a lamp. It is a story written over millions of years, a story of accidents turned into survival. Its glow is not just light, it is history condensed into a flicker, and that flicker is what makes the abyss feel alive. As we drift deeper into that story, the next step is to see how the anglerfish uses this evolutionary trick in its daily life. Because a lantern, no matter how brilliant, is only valuable if it works, and in the abyss it works as the perfect trap. If the anglerfish's lantern is the invention, then the trap it sets with that lantern is the masterpiece. In the abyss there are no bustling reefs full of prey to dart after, no forests of kelp where a predator can stalk from behind a blade. Down here, food is rare. The ocean floor may be hundreds or even thousands of meters below, and nothing grows in the black water. What drifts past is unpredictable, and what is edible must be captured quickly or it is gone. That means every anglerfish must turn patience into a weapon, and the lantern swaying above its mouth is the bait in the perfect trap. Imagine the scene. You're a small fish, hungry after days of drifting through nothingness. All around you is darkness, so complete it feels like an endless wall. Then you see it, a faint glow ahead, a tiny point of light moving gently as if alive. In this emptiness, light is irresistible. It might mean food, it might mean a potential mate. It might simply be something new in a world where nothing ever changes. So you swim closer. The glow wavers like a small worm. It looks easy to catch, a bite-sized meal right within reach. You dart toward it, and in the same instant the blackness around it splits open into jaws lined with teeth that curve inward like hooks. Before you can react, you're inside, swallowed whole, and the lantern continues swaying as if nothing happened. That is the anglerfish's strategy. It doesn't move much. Its body is soft, its muscles weak compared to fast-swimming predators. Chasing would waste energy in a world where meals are scarce. Instead, it turns stillness into camouflage. In the dark, its flabby shape disappears, teeth hidden in shadow, body blending with the background. The only thing visible is the lantern, a flicker of borrowed light. That single glowing dot becomes the entire performance. Everything else about the fish is background noise, waiting silently for the one moment when stillness breaks into violence. This kind of hunting strategy is elegant because it solves several problems at once. The first is energy. Moving quickly burns calories, and calories are hard to come by in the abyss. By staying still, the anglerfish conserves everything it eats. The second is visibility. If it darted through the dark, its body might catch faint bioluminescence from other creatures and reveal itself. But by drifting quietly, it becomes invisible, except for the one thing it wants prey to see. The third is reliability. Prey in the abyss are not abundant. A lure ensures that when something does pass by, curiosity will bring it close. The trap doesn't need to chase food. Food chases the trap. The mechanics of the jaws complete the design. An anglerfish's mouth is enormous relative to its body. Some species can open wide enough to swallow prey almost as large as themselves. Their teeth point inward, not outward, so that once something slips between them, escape is nearly impossible. Imagine a tunnel lined with spikes pointing the wrong way. You can go in, but every movement backward only digs the spikes deeper. That is how an anglerfish's mouth works. The prey is pulled deeper with every struggle until it disappears into the stomach. The stomach itself is flexible, expanding like an elastic bag to hold meals far larger than what the fish appears capable of swallowing. In an environment where food may not appear again for weeks, this ability to gorge when the opportunity arises is critical. It is easy to imagine the prey as helpless victims, but in truth, the interaction is more balanced than it appears. For every creature lured in, countless others drift past unharmed. The abyss is vast, and even a glowing lure is only visible within a certain range. The anglerfish must wait patiently, sometimes for days before a meal wanders close enough. Its trap is perfect, but it is not fast. It is the opposite of fast. It is patient, and patience itself is the design. Some anglerfish species take the trap a step further by adding little decorations to the lure. Their eschers sometimes sprout tendrils or fleshy appendages that make the glow look more convincingly like a small worm or shrimp. A prey animal swimming nearby sees not just a light, but a shape, a movement, a suggestion of food. The detail can make the difference between suspicion and temptation. Evolution has sculpted the lure into more than a bulb. In some cases, it has turned it into a puppet, dangling on a string, performing just well enough to deceive. It is worth pausing here to think about what this means in evolutionary terms. The anglerfish does not chase, it does not stalk, it does not wrestle its prey, it tricks. Its entire survival is built on deception. The lantern is not food, but it looks like food. The stillness of its body is not safety, but it feels like safety. The jaws hidden in darkness are not background, but prey do not realize this until it is too late. That is the genius of the trap. It does not force, it persuades. And persuasion is often stronger than force. In our own human world, we might compare it to a well-placed advertisement. The product being sold may not be what you need, but the image draws you closer, convinces you, tempts you. Only when you're already committed do you realize the cost. The anglerfish, in a way, invented marketing long before humans did. Its glowing lure is a promise, and its teeth are the fine print. Of course, in the abyss, there is no morality in this. The prey is not foolish. The predator is not cruel. They are simply players in a system where survival is everything. The trap works, and because it works, it persists. For millions of years, the lantern has swayed. The jaws have opened, and prey have swum too close. The fact that it still happens today is proof enough of its effectiveness. If the trap had failed, the anglerfish would have vanished long ago. Instead, it thrives, quietly, invisibly, in the dark. What makes this even more fascinating is that the prey are not entirely helpless. Many deep-sea creatures have evolved ways to avoid being fooled. Some recognize certain patterns of light as danger. Others keep their distance from solitary glows, preferring the safety of schools or the camouflage of their own bioluminescence. Yet even with these defences, the anglerfish still succeeds often enough. The lure is not unbeatable, but it is good enough. In evolution, good enough is all that is required. Now imagine again the scene of the trap in action. The anglerfish hangs motionless, the lure swaying. A small fish notices it, hesitates, then circles closer. Its body reflects the faint glow, just enough to reveal its outline. The anglerfish waits, silent. The prey edges closer, and in a fraction of a second the stillness breaks. The jaws expand, teeth flash, and the glow disappears into the predator's body along with its victim. The ocean goes dark again, as if nothing happened. Only the lantern remains, swaying, ready to repeat the trick. In the abyss, this is what survival looks like. Not a constant chase, not a bloody frenzy, but a quiet trick played endlessly. The perfect trap is not about speed or power. It is about patience, deception, and the art of waiting. The anglerfish has perfected that art, turning the simplest glow into the deadliest tool. And so, when we think about predators, we often picture the lion chasing the gazelle, the hawk diving on a rabbit, the shark lunging at a seal. But in truth, one of the most effective predators on Earth is this odd little fish drifting silently in the dark, doing nothing more than holding out a light and waiting. Its success lies not in strength, but in subtlety. That is what makes it the perfect trap. From here, our journey naturally leads to the broader stage. The anglerfish is not the only performer in this theatre of darkness. The abyss is filled with creatures using light in equally strange and clever ways, some for disguise, some for communication, some for trickery of their own. If the anglerfish is the patient magician, then the abyss is the entire show, a place where illusion becomes survival. If the anglerfish is a master illusionist in the deep, then the abyss itself is the theatre. A theatre where the stage is endless black, the spotlight is bioluminescence, and every performer is both actor and audience, predator and prey. Down here, in the darkness beneath 1,000 meters of water, survival is not just about strength or speed. It is about trickery. It is about creating illusions so convincing that they blur the line between life and death. When we think of illusions, we often picture magicians with smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand, a rabbit hidden in a hat. In the deep sea, there are no hats, no hands, no mirrors, yet illusions thrive all the same, crafted not by human cleverness, but by millions of years of evolutionary trial and error. The result is a world where glowing bait, flashing signals and invisible bodies all compete for attention. The ocean at these depths is not empty at all. It is a stage filled with performers whose only audience is one another. The anglerfish's glowing lure is one of the simplest and most effective acts in this theatre, but it is far from the only one. Look around and you will see lanternfish, tiny creatures covered with glowing spots along their sides. They use these spots, called photophores, as camouflage. By glowing on their bellies, they erase their own shadows, blending into the faint light from above. To predators below, they disappear, their outline gone. This is called counter-illumination, a trick as elegant as any disguise crafted by human hands. Then there are squids that release glowing clouds instead of ink. A predator chasing them is suddenly blinded by a burst of light in the water, a luminous smoke screen that confuses and distracts. By the time the light fades, the squid is long gone, its soft body safely hidden again. Some jellyfish, when attacked, throw off glowing tentacle pieces that continue to flash and shimmer, a decoy meal that lures the predator away from the main body. The jelly drifts off quietly, while the attacker wastes time biting glowing scraps. And then there are creatures that use light not for defense but for attraction, much like the anglerfish. Some deep-sea shrimp and worms send out pulses of light to signal one another. Certain fish flash patterns that only their own species can recognize, like secret codes written in luminescence. A few even synchronize their glows, creating waves of light that ripple through the dark like living fireworks. To us, it would look like a silent rave in the abyss. To them, it is communication, survival, perhaps even a form of beauty. The most dramatic performers, however, are the predators. The dragonfish, for example, carries a jaw filled with teeth so transparent they're almost invisible. It has glowing organs beneath its eyes, like headlights, and some species even produce red bioluminescence, a colour invisible to most deep-sea animals. Imagine that, a flashlight that only you can see. The dragonfish shines red beams to search for prey without being noticed, a stealth hunter carrying an invisible torch. It is an illusion of invisibility, a private wavelength in a public sea. And then, of course, there is the anglerfish again, holding its borrowed lantern in silence, dangling its bait like a fishing line. To the prey, the light looks like a small snack. To the predator, it is a signal of opportunity. But to us, watching from the outside, it is theatre, a stage act of deception, one fish dressed as another, using light as costume and teeth as the final reveal. What makes this theatre extraordinary is that the actors don't know they are performing. A jellyfish doesn't know its glowing scraps are decoys. A squid doesn't know its luminous smokescreen is a trick. An anglerfish doesn't know its lure is a stage prop. And yet the result is indistinguishable from a play. The darkness is the stage, the light is the performance, and the stakes are always survival. In the abyss, every illusion is life or death. To imagine this properly, think of standing in a theatre with no lights at all. The curtain rises, but the stage is completely black. You can hear faint rustles, feel the pressure of silence. Then suddenly a single glow appears, a spotlight cutting through the void. A performer steps into it, but you cannot see their face. You only see the outline, the suggestion. Another glow flashes elsewhere, then fades. The entire play unfolds in fragments of light, each flash revealing only a piece of the story. That is what life in the deep sea is like. A play written in darkness, performed in sparks and glimmers, never revealing the full picture, only the parts that matter in the moment. It's worth asking why illusions are so common here. On land, camouflage works well enough. A deer blends into the trees, a tiger's stripes hide it in tall grass. Why go to the trouble of glowing when you could simply remain dark? The answer lies in the environment. Down here the darkness is absolute. Shadows stand out as much as shapes. A creature that does nothing glows only by its silhouette against faint traces of light from above. That makes it vulnerable. But if it glows deliberately in the right way, it can erase its own shadow, or trick others into seeing something that isn't there. Illusions become not just useful, but essential. The Anglerfish's contribution to this theatre is its performance of hunger. The light does not look like danger. It does not look like a predator. It looks like food, small and harmless. The illusion is so convincing that prey approach willingly, as if participating in the act. When the jaws close, the curtain falls, and the play ends abruptly. It is not dramatic in our sense of the word. It is not flamboyant, but it is effective, and effectiveness is the only applause that matters in this theatre. Other performers take different roles. Some glow to look bigger than they are, flashing to scare predators away. Others glow to vanish, erasing themselves against the faint light. Some lure, some warn, some deceive, some seduce. Together they create a kaleidoscope of illusions that define the midnight zone. To us, it would look beautiful, like fireworks or constellations scattered underwater. To them, it is communication, deception, and survival woven together. The strange part is that we almost never see this theatre directly. Human eyes, unaided, cannot see much in the abyss. To witness it, we rely on cameras and submersibles, carrying artificial lights that flood the stage and ruin the play. When the floodlights switch on, the illusions vanish. The camouflage is exposed, the lures look obvious, the glow fades in comparison to our harsh beams. The only way to see the theatre as it truly is to turn the lights off, to sit in the darkness and let the sparks of life reveal themselves naturally. Researchers who have done this describe it as magical, a galaxy unfolding in water, each glow a star, each star alive. It reminds us that light in the deep sea is not decoration. It is not for beauty alone. It is survival, and survival shapes it into illusions more convincing than anything we could invent. The Anglerfish's trap is only one act in this performance, but it is perhaps the most memorable, because it turns a glow into bait, a lantern into a snare. It embodies the essence of the Abyss's theatre. Nothing is what it seems, and everything is a trick. And as we drift deeper into this strange world of illusions, another question emerges. How do creatures manage to live at all in such an extreme environment, where pressure is crushing, food is rare, and light is nothing but deception? The answer lies not just in tricks of appearance, but in bodies built to endure the impossible. And to understand the anglerfish fully, we must look at what it means to survive at the very edge of what life can tolerate. The deep ocean does not welcome life. It does not extend a hand, offer comfort, or make room easily. It is a place defined by absence. No sunlight penetrates, no warmth arrives from above, and no plants grow in the endless black. The pressure increases with every metre of depth until it reaches levels that would flatten a submarine. The water is cold, hovering just above freezing, not the shifting chill of surface seas, but a permanent, inescapable cold that seeps into everything. To us, it feels impossible that anything could live here at all. And yet, not only do creatures live here, they flourish. The anglerfish is just one face of this impossible world. To understand it, We have to step into the reality of what surviving in such conditions truly means. Start with the pressure. At the surface, we live under one atmosphere of pressure, the weight of air pressing down on us. It feels like nothing because we are adapted to it. Our body's built with bones and fluids that balance it perfectly. But in the ocean, pressure rises quickly. Every 10 meters down adds another atmosphere. By the time you reach 1,000 meters, the weight is 100 times greater than what we experience at sea level. Imagine standing at the bottom of a stack of 100 cars. That is the force pressing in from every direction. Steel hulls bend under such pressure. Submersibles designed to withstand it creak and groan like old houses in a storm, and yet creatures like the anglerfish drift through it effortlessly, their bodies unbothered by the crushing weight. The secret lies in their design. Deep-sea creatures rarely have gas-filled spaces in their bodies because gas compresses under pressure. A human diver with lungs full of air feels the squeeze within minutes of descending. Fish that live nearer the surface often rely on swim bladders, sacs of gas that control buoyancy. But in the deep, swim bladders would collapse. Anglerfish and many others have abandoned them entirely. Their bodies are soft, gelatinous, filled with water and flexible tissues that do not resist compression. Instead of fighting the pressure, they yield to it, blending with it, becoming part of it. It is like the difference between a rigid can that crushes when stepped on and a bag of water that simply changes shape. The anglerfish survives because it does not resist the abyss. It accepts it. Next comes the cold. At depths beyond 1,000 meters, temperatures remain between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius, just above freezing, and they never change. There are no warm seasons, no sunlit shallows to retreat to, no relief from the chill. For us, such cold is hostile. It slows reactions, stiffens muscles, drains energy. For the anglerfish, it is simply normal. Its enzymes, the proteins that drive its chemistry, are adapted to work at low temperatures. Its metabolism runs slowly, conserving energy, ticking at a pace that would feel sluggish to surface fish. But here, that slowness is survival. Fast metabolisms burn too much fuel, and in the abyss, fuel is scarce. The anglerfish's body, soft and slow, is built for endurance. It can wait for days without eating, hovering in stillness, its lantern swaying, until a meal finally wanders close. That scarcity is perhaps the most daunting challenge. Food in the abyss does not come from below. It comes from above, drifting down as a rain of particles called marine snow. Tiny flakes of organic matter, bits of dead plankton, fragments of fish and jellyfish, even fecal pellets, all drifting slowly downward. It is a constant fall, but it is thin, sparse, and mostly consumed long before it reaches the deep. What does arrive must be fought over, scavenged, or caught by predators waiting in silence. Some creatures survive on scraps, nibbling what they can. Others, like the anglerfish, wait for larger prizes. A single fish or squid swallowed whole can sustain it for weeks. Its stomach stretches, expanding to hold meals far bigger than its body seems able to contain. When food is scarce, overeating is not a vice. It is a necessity. Even reproduction here becomes a challenge. How do you find a mate in an environment where you might drift for years without seeing another of your kind? Many deep-sea species solve this problem with unusual strategies. Some release eggs and sperm into the water, letting chance do the work. Others, like anglerfish, evolve stranger solutions, ones that fuse partners together permanently. We'll get to that odd story soon, but for now it is enough to recognise that the abyss forces life into creativity. In a place where the odds of meeting are slim, species invent new ways to keep going. Despite all this, the abyss is not barren. It is crowded with life adapted to impossibility. Transparent shrimp pulse with faint light as they signal in the dark. Squat lobsters crawl across the seafloor near hydrothermal vents, places where heat and chemicals seep from the earth itself. Giant squid patrol open waters, their eyes the largest of any animal, tuned to catch even the faintest glimmer. Lanternfish rise and fall in vertical migrations so vast they may be the greatest movement of biomass on the planet. Each of these creatures is strange, yes, but they are all proof of the same fact. Life does not just endure the impossible, it transforms it into home. For the anglerfish, that home is defined by patience. Its life is not a flurry of movement, it is a long wait punctuated by sudden violence when prey approaches. It is stillness, glow, and teeth. From the outside it seems grim, but to the fish it is simply existence. It knows nothing else. To call it impossible is our judgment, from the comfort of sunlight and warmth. For the anglerfish there is no impossible, there is only survival. What fascinates us, perhaps, is how ordinary this seems once you understand it. We look at the anglerfish and see an alien, a monster with a lamp on its head. But in truth, it is no more alien than we are. Its adaptations are extreme, yes, but they follow the same logic as every adaptation: fit the environment or vanish. We live in cities because we fit the surface. Birds grow wings because they fit the sky. The anglerfish glows because it fits the dark. Each is extraordinary only because we are looking from the outside, and yet there is something in the abyss that feels different. Perhaps it is the scale. The midnight zone covers more of Earth than all forests and deserts and mountains combined. It is the largest habitat on the planet, and it is ruled not by sunlight but by darkness. To survive there is to survive at the edge of what life can do. The anglerfish is one symbol of that achievement. A small, strange face carrying a lantern through blackness. Its body may look crude, its teeth excessive, its shape ungainly. But every detail is a solution to the same puzzle: how to live where life should not be able to. It leaves us with a quiet humility. The abyss seems hostile, but to its residents it is not hostile at all. It is home. They do not struggle against it the way we imagine. They do not curse the pressure or the cold. They simply exist within it, adapted so perfectly that what feels impossible to us is ordinary to them. That is perhaps the greatest lesson of the anglerfish and its neighbours. Life does not conquer the impossible, it redefines it. And as we watch this strange little lantern bearer drift patiently in the dark, the next story waiting to be told is one even stranger than its glowing trap. For in the abyss, survival is not only about eating, it is also about finding someone else, and the way anglerfish have solved the puzzle of love in the darkness is as bizarre and fascinating as anything in nature. In the abyss, finding food is hard enough, but finding love might be the greatest challenge of all. Imagine drifting in a world so vast that you might never see another of your kind, where the dark is unbroken and distances stretch endlessly. On the surface, animals can see one another, hear one another, smell each other on the air. But in the deep sea, sound is muted, sight is nearly useless, and scent drifts away in the endless currents. For many creatures here, the chance of ever crossing paths with a mate is close to zero, and yet, without solving that problem, no species could survive. The anglerfish's answer to this puzzle is one of the strangest love stories in all of biology. The females are the ones we imagine when we think of anglerfish. The strange, big-headed creatures with gaping jaws and glowing lures. They are the hunters, the predators with lanterns swaying in the dark. But the males are something else entirely. In many deep-sea anglerfish species, males are tiny, sometimes just a fraction of the female's size. If the female is the length of your forearm, the male might be no larger than your thumb. He has no lure, no giant teeth, no impressive jaw. He is, compared to her, plain and almost incomplete, and his life has a singular mission: to find her. That task alone is monumental. In an ocean so vast, how can something so small ever hope to locate one specific partner? The answer lies in scent. Males are equipped with an extraordinarily keen sense of smell, tuned to detect pheromones released by females. For much of their lives, they drift through the dark, sniffing faint chemical trails, following the wisps of scent like detectives chasing invisible clues. It is a dangerous existence, small, vulnerable, and with no real way to feed themselves for long. Time is against them. If they do not find a female, they will not survive. But when they do find one, something extraordinary happens. Instead of courting her, instead of mating and moving on, the male attaches himself permanently. He bites into her side with small, sharp teeth. At first, he is simply clinging on, but over time, his body fuses with hers. His skin and blood vessels merge into hers until they share a single circulatory system. Slowly, he loses his independence. His organs wither away. His eyes, his digestive system, even most of his brain. What remains is little more than a pair of gonads, connected to her body, fed by her blood. He has become, in a sense, a permanent part of her, a living appendage that exists solely to provide sperm whenever she's ready to reproduce. This is known as sexual parasitism, though the word parasitism doesn't quite capture the strangeness of the arrangement. The male is not harming her. He is not draining her against her will. He's simply absorbed, incorporated, made part of her body. From one perspective, it is gruesome. A male losing himself entirely, becoming nothing but a reproductive organ. From another perspective, it is brilliant. In an environment where finding a mate may happen once in a lifetime, permanent attachment ensures that the chance will not be wasted. She never has to search for him again. He never has to search for her again. They are fused, inseparable, solving the problem of reproduction in a way no romance novel would dare suggest. Sometimes more than one male attaches. A single female might carry several tiny males fused to her body, like strange growths sprouting from her skin. Each one contributes sperm when needed, and each one survives only because her body sustains them. She becomes not just herself, but a colony. One large lantern-bearing predator carrying her own mates permanently on board. It is an arrangement so far removed from anything we know that it feels almost alien, yet it works. And in the abyss, that is all that matters. To us, this seems less like romance and more like horror, but perhaps that's because we bring our own expectations to it. We imagine love as a meeting of equals, a partnership of individuals. But in the abyss, equality is irrelevant. What matters is efficiency. The females do the hunting, carrying the lantern, catching the food. The males dedicate themselves entirely to reproduction, nothing more. They are born, they search, they fuse, and then their story ends inside hers. It is a love story written by necessity, stripped of our ideas of beauty, yet undeniably effective. What makes it even more fascinating is how different this is from other animals. Most species, even in the deep sea, reproduce in ways more familiar to us. Temporary pairings, broadcast spawning, seasonal gatherings. The anglerfish's method is unique. It shows just how far evolution can bend when pushed by the extremes of environment. When the odds of finding a mate are so low, the safest strategy is to never let go once you've found one. It may seem extreme, but it ensures the species continues. It's also a reminder that nature does not follow our sense of romance. To us, this arrangement may seem grotesque, even tragic, the male losing his entire existence to become part of another. But to the anglerfish, it is not grotesque or tragic. It simply is. The male's life is not wasted. It fulfills its role perfectly. The female's life is not lonely. She carries her mates with her, their presence guaranteed whenever reproduction is needed. In its own way, it is a form of intimacy so complete that it erases individuality. They become one body, one system, one survival strategy. It also raises philosophical questions. What does it mean to be an individual when survival depends on fusion? Where does the male end and the female begin once their bodies merge? Are they still two organisms, or have they become one? Biology gives us technical answers. They are still genetically distinct but physiologically united. But the larger truth is that survival does not care about categories. It cares about what works, and this works. Picture it now, a female anglerfish drifting in the dark, her lantern swaying, jaws waiting patiently. On her side, a tiny male clings, his body already merging into hers. He's no longer searching, no longer vulnerable, no longer separate. He has found his place, and in doing so has lost himself. She carries him as she carries her lantern, as part of her existence, as part of her story. It is strange, yes. It is unsettling, yes. But it is also remarkable. Out of all the impossible challenges of the abyss, they have solved the greatest one. How to find love in a place where love should be impossible. And so the anglerfish teaches us again that survival bends the rules. It creates light in darkness. It creates traps out of patience. And it creates romance out of fusion. Intimacy written not in poetry, but in physiology. In the abyss, this is what love looks like. A joining so complete that it becomes permanent. A partnership that endures because there is no other way. From here, our journey leads back to the fish itself, to its body and the contradictions it embodies. A predator that looks incomplete, a creature both fragile and terrifying, a collection of extremes balanced in a single drifting form. The anglerfish, more than almost any creature in the abyss, is a bundle of contradictions. Look at it long enough and you see a body that feels mismatched, like parts borrowed from different designs stitched together into one improbable whole. A head that is too large for its body, a mouth that is too wide for its frame, teeth that look oversized even for jaws as big as these, a lure that glows though the fish cannot glow itself. A body soft and fragile, yet belonging to a predator feared by nearly everything its size or smaller. Nothing about it looks balanced, and yet it works. That is the contradiction at the heart of the anglerfish. Awkward in appearance, but elegant in function. Start with the head. Out of proportion to the rest of the body, it dominates the fish's silhouette. If most fish seem streamlined, built to slice through water with minimal effort, the anglerfish looks like the opposite. Its head is a swollen balloon with a cavernous mouth attached. From a human perspective, it looks clumsy, as though it would struggle to swim straight. But this apparent disadvantage is precisely what makes it effective. The giant mouth can engulf prey, far larger than the fish itself, and in an environment where meals are rare, that flexibility is survival. A streamlined body is for speed. A huge mouth is for patience. The anglerfish chose patience. The teeth add to this impression. They are long, thin and needle-like, so long that the jaws cannot close fully around them. They interlock instead, a cage of spikes pointing inward. From the outside it looks excessive, almost grotesque, as if nature went too far with the design. But look closer, and the function becomes clear. Once prey slips inside, those backward-pointing teeth prevent escape. Every wriggle only drives the victim deeper. The mouth is not elegant, but it is efficient. It doesn't need to chew. It doesn't need precision. It only needs to trap and swallow whole. Then there is the body itself, small compared to the head, soft compared to the teeth. In the crushing depths of the abyss, rigid bodies are liabilities. Bones crack under pressure. Gas-filled swim bladders collapse. The anglerfish avoids this entirely by being flabby, flexible, gelatinous. It does not resist the water pressing in on it. It yields. To us that looks weak. To the anglerfish, it is strength. A soft body bends where a hard one would break. Fragility becomes durability. That is another contradiction. Looking weak while being perfectly strong in the only way that matters here. The lure completes the portrait. It is not part of the fish's body in the traditional sense. It glows because of bacteria, not because of the fish's own cells. To us this seems like a flaw, as if the anglerfish were incomplete, needing another species to finish what it could not do itself. But to the anglerfish, this is not a flaw at all. It is efficiency. Why evolve the complex chemistry of light when bacteria already know how to do it? The fish simply builds a house for them and reaps the reward. It is outsourcing at its finest. Another contradiction, appearing dependent while actually being ingenious. Even its size holds contradictions. Some anglerfish species are only a few centimetres long, fragile little things floating in endless dark. Yet they carry jaws and teeth fit for giants. Others grow larger, up to a metre, but remain delicate in structure, easy to crush outside the pressure of their natural world. They look monstrous in illustrations, but in reality they are often tiny, almost fragile enough to crumble in your hand if brought to the surface. They are predators that look terrifying in pictures, but are vulnerable in reality, unable to survive even the act of being caught. And then there is the matter of reproduction, that strange fusion of male and female we've already explored. A female anglerfish carries her mates attached to her body, sometimes several at once, tiny remnants of individuals turned into organs. To us this seems horrifying, another contradiction, a love story that feels more like a horror story. But in the abyss it is simply logical. To fuse is to survive. To carry mates permanently is to ensure the next generation. What looks grotesque to us is romance to them, and what looks tragic to us is triumph in the dark. These contradictions pile up until the anglerfish seems almost unreal. Predator and fragile drifter, dependent and ingenious, awkward and efficient, monstrous and beautiful. To study it is to confront how many of our ideas about animals are shaped by our own environment. We think sleek bodies are better because we live in a world where speed matters. We think independence is strength because we live in a world where partnerships feel like compromises. We think symmetry and grace are beauty because that is what we are used to seeing. But the abyss plays by different rules. Here, beauty is patience. Here, strength is softness. Here, dependence is survival. The anglerfish embodies those rules so completely that it looks strange to us only because we are strangers to its world. It is worth picturing the fish in motion. A female anglerfish drifts in stillness, her lure swaying, her body hovering with minimal effort. She does not race. She does not chase. She does not waste energy on anything unnecessary. She waits. In her waiting lies her efficiency. In her softness lies her durability. In her glowing lure lies her borrowed genius. She's a collection of contradictions that add up to a perfect fit for the abyss. When humans first discovered anglerfish, these contradictions confused us. Preserved specimens brought to the surface looked grotesque. Their soft bodies collapsed, their forms distorted by pressure changes. Illustrations exaggerated their monstrous features, turning them into icons of nightmare. Films and books made them villains, creatures of the deep meant to frighten. And yet, when seen alive in their own world, they are not monsters at all. They are delicate, patient, and strangely graceful in their own way. The contradictions resolve themselves when seen in context. The abyss is not our world, it is theirs. This may be the greatest contradiction of all. The anglerfish looks alien to us, but to its own world it is ordinary. To us, it seems like a mistake. To the abyss, it is perfection. Every awkward feature, every fragile detail, every borrowed adaptation is exactly what is required. It is not a monster. It is a mirror of its environment, shaped by pressures we can barely imagine. And perhaps that is why it fascinates us so deeply. It forces us to confront our assumptions. It reminds us that what looks like weakness may be strength, what looks like ugliness may be adaptation, and what looks like contradiction may actually be harmony when viewed from the right perspective. The anglerfish is not a mistake of nature. It is a masterpiece written in a language we are only beginning to understand. As we drift with it further into the abyss, Carrying these contradictions in mind, the next question emerges. The lantern it carries, the glow that defines it, remains mysterious. How exactly did these bacteria come to live inside the lure? How do they find their way into the fish generation after generation? The mystery of the glow itself, and the unanswered questions it leaves, is the next step in this journey. The lure of the anglerfish seems simple at first. It shines, it sways, it attracts, it kills. But the closer we look, the stranger it becomes, because the glow itself is not fully understood. We know the basics, that bacteria produce it, that the fish houses them inside the fleshy bulb at the end of its spine, that the relationship benefits both. But the details are still mysterious. Even after decades of study, scientists cannot say with complete certainty how the bacteria arrive, why they glow so reliably, or what signals pass between fish and microbes to keep the lantern alive. In the abyss, light itself remains a mystery. Start with the most immediate puzzle. Where did the bacteria come from? Anglerfish are not born glowing. Their eggs hatch into larvae that float near the surface, carried by currents. At that stage, the lure is present, but it is empty, just a fleshy pocket with no light. The glow only appears once the right bacteria colonize it. But those bacteria are not inherited directly from the mother. They must be acquired from the environment. That means somewhere in the vast ocean, invisible and scattered, are free-living relatives of the symbiotic bacteria, drifting in currents, waiting to find a home. The odds of this happening seem impossibly low. A larval anglerfish, smaller than your fingertip, must encounter exactly the right species of microbe in the endless dark and somehow persuade it to settle inside its esker. Without it, the lantern remains dark, and a dark lantern means hunger, failure, death. And yet, generation after generation it happens. The fact that anglerfish exist at all is proof that this impossible meeting repeats often enough to sustain the species. How? That is still unknown. One hypothesis is that the fish releases chemical signals from its esker that attract the right microbes, a kind of invitation written in molecules. Another suggests the structure of the tissue itself creates a selective environment, a niche where only bioluminescent bacteria can survive. It might be both. The truth is probably complex, a layered interaction of signals and conditions that guide the bacteria in and exclude all others. But whatever the method, the result is precise. Not just any bacteria glow. Only a handful of species carry the right genes for bioluminescence, and anglerfish lures are almost always filled with those exact strains. Something is filtering, something is choosing, but the mechanism remains hidden in the dark. The next mystery is why the bacteria glow so consistently once inside. Producing light is not free. It consumes energy that could otherwise go toward growth and reproduction. In most environments, a bacterium that wastes energy would be outcompeted by one that doesn't. But inside the esker, glowing is rewarded. The fish feeds its tenants with nutrients, ensuring their survival. In return, the glowing strains thrive, while freeloaders that do not shine are excluded. How the fish enforces this is unknown. Perhaps its immune system suppresses non-luminous bacteria. Perhaps the nutrients it provides are structured so only glowing strains can process them fully. Whatever the mechanism, the result is the same. Inside the esker, light is the currency, and those who shine are the ones who stay. This makes the anglerfish's lantern one of the most striking examples of selective symbiosis on Earth. The fish doesn't just house bacteria, it curates them. It shapes an environment where only the useful survive. The glow, then, is not simply a byproduct, it is a requirement. The bacteria shine because shining keeps them alive. And yet, this arrangement raises even deeper questions. If the bacteria exist both inside the anglerfish and free in the ocean, why do the free-living ones glow at all? Out in the open water, shining serves no obvious purpose. It attracts predators. It wastes energy. but they still do it. Perhaps they glow because they cannot turn it off, because the biochemical pathways are locked in place. Or perhaps glowing serves some unknown function even in the open water, something we have not yet understood. Maybe the light helps them colonize new hosts, signalling to anglerfish larvae in ways we cannot detect. The truth remains elusive, another puzzle of the abyss. The glow itself, from a chemical perspective, is remarkably efficient. The bacteria use a molecule called luciferin, along with an enzyme called luciferase, to produce light through an oxidation reaction. The photons released are in the blue-green spectrum, the wavelengths that travel farthest in water. To our eyes, the light appears ghostly, cool, almost otherworldly. To the prey of the anglerfish, it appears irresistible. What is striking is how little energy is wasted. Unlike fire, which produces both heat and light, bioluminescence produces almost no heat at all. It is cold light, designed for efficiency. In the abyss, that efficiency is everything. But even here, mysteries linger. Why blue-green specifically? Why not red, or yellow, or ultraviolet? The answer seems simple at first. Blue-green light travels best in water, scattering less, visible from farther away. But some species, like the dragonfish, do produce red light, invisible to most others, but useful as a private spotlight. Could anglerfish have evolved red lures, invisible to predators but visible to prey? Perhaps, but they didn't. Why not? Maybe because their bacterial partners only know how to produce blue-green. Maybe because evolution stumbled into this wavelength and stayed there. Maybe because blue-green works well enough, and in evolution, good enough is the rule. There is also the question of control. Can the anglerfish switch its glow on and off? In some species, evidence suggests yes. Muscles around the esker can contract, blocking light. Pigment cells may act like shutters, dimming the glow or letting it shine. This would allow the fish to hide its lantern when danger is near, or to pulse it like a wriggling worm when luring prey. But not all species have this ability, and we still don't know how much conscious control is involved. Does the fish decide when to shine, or is it automatic, dictated by the bacteria and their chemistry? The line between intention and accident blurs. In the abyss, even agency itself becomes a mystery. All of these questions, where the bacteria come from, how they are selected, why they glow, whether the fish controls them, remain partly unanswered because studying them is so difficult. Collecting live anglerfish is nearly impossible. Their bodies are fragile, collapsing under the change in pressure when brought to the surface. The bacteria themselves often die outside their host, resistant to being cultured in laboratories. What we know comes from fragments, from specimens, from fleeting glimpses caught by submersibles in the dark. Each answer reveals another question, and the glow remains in many ways unexplained, and maybe that is part of the fascination. Light in the abyss is already improbable. To find that it is also mysterious, even after decades of research, makes it more so. We can describe the chemistry, map the genetics, trace the symbiosis, but the details remain full of gaps. Every flicker of the anglerfish's lantern is both explanation and enigma. It shines not just for prey, but for us, as a reminder that there are still things in the world we do not fully understand. Picture the fish again, drifting in stillness, the lure swaying in silence. To its prey, the glow is simple, a promise of food. To the fish, it is simple, a tool for survival. But to us, watching from the outside, it is layered with questions. Where did the light come from? How did it find its way into this body? Why does it never seem to fail? The glow is not just a signal in the dark. It is a mystery in plain sight, one we may not solve completely for years to come. And perhaps that is fitting. The abyss should not give up all its secrets too easily. It is a place defined by mystery, and the glow of the anglerfish embodies that perfectly. It is at once explained and unexplained, ordinary and miraculous, a chemical reaction and a living wonder. It reminds us that even in science, even in knowledge, There is room for mystery, room for awe. As we leave this puzzle glowing behind us, the next thought waiting in the dark is broader. Why does light matter so much here in the first place? Why has the abyss filled itself with sparks and glimmers, illusions and signals, when it could have remained pure black? The answer lies not just in the anglerfish, but in the entire community of glowing creatures that share its world. When we think about light, we think about it as something ordinary, something always there. On the surface, the sun rises every day. Lamps flick on with the push of a button. Screens glow in our hands without effort. We treat light as background, invisible in its familiarity. Only when it vanishes do we notice how deeply we depend on it. Imagine a power outage in the middle of the night. Suddenly every small task becomes difficult, every shadow unsettling. Without light, we lose orientation, comfort, and a sense of safety. If that is true for us on land, in a world overflowing with brightness, imagine what it means in the abyss, where light is the rarest resource of all. In the midnight zone, below 1,000 meters, sunlight is gone entirely. There are no dawns or sunsets, no moonlight slipping through clouds, no starlight on the waves. The ocean there is black, absolute and permanent. To live in that environment is to live in a world without vision, without shape, without boundary. In such a world, light does more than reveal. It transforms the environment. A single flicker can change everything. That is why bioluminescence has become not just common but essential. It is the way life reintroduces light into a place where nature has removed it. For some creatures, light is camouflage. Lanternfish glow along their undersides to erase their shadows, blending with the faint glow filtering down from above. To predators watching from below, they vanish into the background. This is called counter-illumination, and it turns light into invisibility. In a world where darkness is normal, glowing can make you harder to see. For others, light is communication. Shrimp flash signals to attract mates, squid ripple patterns across their bodies, creating silent conversations in the dark. Even plankton pulse faint sparks when disturbed, waves of light spreading like whispers across the water. In a place where sound and scent travel unpredictably, light becomes language. It allows one creature to say, "I am here," to another that might never have noticed. Still others use light as defense. Some squid eject clouds of glowing fluid instead of ink, dazzling predators long enough to escape. Certain jellyfish shed glowing limbs that continue to flash, distracting attackers while the main body drifts away unharmed. Even small crustaceans release bioluminescent chemicals when swallowed, making predators themselves glow. A dangerous spotlight in a world where invisibility is survival. Here, light becomes a weapon, turning the hunter into the hunted. And for predators like the anglerfish, light is lure. It is the promise of food in a world of scarcity. A glow sways in the dark, looking like a worm, a small fish, something easy to catch. Prey approaches willingly, unaware that the glow is not dinner, but the bait of jaws waiting just behind. Here, light is not truth but illusion, a trick played on hunger and curiosity. This is why light matters so much in darkness. It is never neutral. On land, a lamp simply helps us see. In the abyss, every flicker has a purpose. To glow is to survive, and every glow means something. To us it may look beautiful, like stars scattered in water. To the creatures themselves it is language, disguise, warning, seduction. In darkness, light becomes everything. It is striking to realise how much of the deep sea glows. Some estimates suggest that up to 90% of species in the mid-water zones produce bioluminescence in some form. That means the abyss is not an empty black void, but a galaxy of tiny stars, scattered and flickering, each one alive. To see it without artificial lights is to witness something few humans ever do. A living sky beneath the ocean, constellations of fish, shrimp, and plankton weaving their signals into the dark. For the anglerfish, this galaxy of light is both opportunity and danger. Its lantern must stand out enough to tempt prey, but not so much that it attracts predators. The glow must be believable, small enough to look like food, but not so large that it looks suspicious. It must sway in a rhythm that matches a struggling worm or drifting shrimp. Too fast and it looks unnatural. Too slow and it loses attention. The anglerfish's light matters because it is fine-tuned, not just glowing, but glowing persuasively. The lantern is not simply a bulb, it is performance. What makes this all the more fascinating is that the light we see is not for us at all. Every glow in the abyss evolved for creatures that live there, not for human eyes. We are outsiders, watching a play that was never meant for us. Yet it moves us because we recognize the roles. A lure is a trap, a flash is a warning, a glow is a signal. Even in the dark ocean, stripped of everything familiar, the rules feel strangely human. We understand the performance instinctively, even if we're not its audience. Light matters in darkness because it restores meaning. Without it, the abyss is featureless, endless, shapeless. With it, the abyss becomes a stage, a place where actions and reactions can occur. Prey can be deceived. Predators can be tricked. Mates can be found. Communities can form. Without light, there is no story. With light, there is drama. That is why the anglerfish's lantern captivates us so much. It is not just a glow. It is a narrative device in a world otherwise without plot. And perhaps that is why humans are so drawn to bioluminescence in general. We are creatures of light ourselves. Our entire history is bound to fire, to torches, to lamps, to electricity. We define our days and nights by light and dark. To see it appear naturally in the ocean, where it should not exist, feels like magic, but it is the same story repeated in another form. Fire in the night gave us safety, communication and power. Light in the abyss gives the same to its creatures. Across such different worlds, the role of light is the same, to make the impossible livable. So when you picture the anglerfish's lantern glowing in the dark, remember that it is more than a curiosity. It is part of a larger pattern, a chorus of light in the darkest place on Earth. It is one note in a symphony of illusions and signals, each flicker carrying meaning in the silence. Light matters here not just because it lets creatures see, but because it lets them exist at all. And as we think about this galaxy of living light, it leads us naturally to a bigger question. What does this say about life beyond Earth? If light matters so much in our own planet's darkness, what might it mean for worlds even darker than our oceans? Could glowing creatures exist beneath the ice of distant moons, or in oceans we have never seen? The anglerfish's lantern is not just a trick of evolution. It may be a clue to how life writes its stories anywhere light is scarce. The anglerfish may be the most famous creature to carry a lantern in the abyss, but it is far from the only one. If you were to drift slowly through the midnight zone with all artificial lights turned off, you would discover that the anglerfish is part of a vast community of glowing hunters and glowing prey, each carrying their own version of a lantern. Some look familiar, others look bizarre, and together they fill the dark water with a constellation of living sparks. To call them many lantern bearers is no exaggeration. They are a galaxy of light scattered across the deep sea. What makes the anglerfish stand out is its use of light as a lure, but many others use their lanterns differently. Lanternfish, for instance, are among the most abundant creatures on Earth, numbering in the trillions, and they glow with neat rows of tiny photophores along their sides and bellies. These are not lures, but disguises. By glowing downward with the same brightness as the faint light filtering from above, they erase their shadows. A predator looking up from the depths sees nothing. It is a clever inversion. They carry lanterns not to be seen, but to vanish. Entire schools of lanternfish drift through the water like invisible fleets, each body erased by its own controlled glow. Dragonfish take another path. These sleek predators carry bioluminescent organs under their eyes, shining beams forward like headlights. Some even produce red light, a rarity in the deep, invisible to most creatures except themselves. With this secret flashlight, they illuminate prey without being noticed, hunting under a private spectrum of light. Imagine carrying a torch only you can see. That is the dragonfish's gift, an innovation that makes it one of the most formidable predators in the deep. Its lantern is not a lure or camouflage. It is a weapon of stealth. Hatchetfish offer yet another variation. Their bodies are flattened like silver coins, reflecting the faintest glimmers of light from above. But their real magic lies in the photophores lining their undersides, which glow to match the brightness of the sky. Like lanternfish, they use counter-illumination to hide, but theirs is more precise, finely tuned to the exact conditions of light at different depths and times of day. In a world where shadows mean death, their lanterns are shields. They shine in order to disappear. And then there are the squids, those restless inventors of the ocean. Some, like the firefly squid of shallower waters, carry thousands of glowing organs that can flash in dazzling patterns, lighting up entire swarms like living fireworks. Others, deeper and stranger, use their lanterns to communicate silently, rippling signals across their bodies like glowing language. A few even release bioluminescent ink, a glowing smokescreen that blinds predators long enough to vanish. Squids turn lanterns into art, into speech, into defense. They're among the most versatile lantern bearers in the sea. Even small crustaceans carry lights. Certain shrimp glow when disturbed, releasing sudden bursts of blue-green light into the water. To a predator, this can be startling, a flash that ruins the element of surprise. Some release glowing chemicals when swallowed, making the predator itself light up, exposed and vulnerable to larger hunters. Here, the lantern becomes a curse, a mark that says, "I am not safe to eat." Jellyfish join this list too. Some pulse with rings of light, mesmerizing spirals that confuse attackers. Others drop glowing pieces of their own bodies, decoys that continue to flash as the main animal drifts away. Even fragile comb jellies, not true jellyfish but close cousins, scatter rainbows of light across their rows of cilia, shimmering like prisms drifting in the dark. They are not hunters, not fighters, but their lanterns make them unforgettable performers in the abyssal theatre. All of these creatures, with their endless variations of glowing tricks, remind us that light in the abyss is not rare at all. It is the rule. The anglerfish may be our cultural symbol of deep-sea bioluminescence, but it is only one among thousands. Each species carries its lantern in a different way, for a different purpose, shaped by the same darkness but adapted to its own needs. Together they form a living constellation, as vast and complex as the stars above our heads. What unites them all is necessity. In the absence of sunlight, light becomes a tool that evolution reinvents over and over again. Fish, squid, shrimp, jellies, even bacteria, all have stumbled on the same solution, though each uses it differently. Some for invisibility, some for communication, some for hunting, some for survival. Light is the common thread, the shared answer to the same impossible question: how to live in eternal darkness. It is easy to forget as we list these lantern bearers that each glow is the result of millions of years of trial and error. There was no plan, no blueprint, just small accidents that proved useful and were preserved. A molecule that glowed faintly, a cell that amplified it, an organ that specialized in it, a behavior that made use of it. Step by step, light spread through the abyss until it became not the exception, but the expectation. If you're alive here, chances are you glow. And yet, despite this abundance, the anglerfish remains unique. Its lantern is not camouflage like the lanternfish, not headlights like the dragonfish, not language like the squid. It is bait. It is the purest illusion. Food that is not food. Light that leads not to nourishment but to jaws. The anglerfish's place among the many lantern bearers is defined by its deception. That is why we remember it most. Among galaxies of glowing creatures, it stands out not because it glows brightest, but because it glows with the cruelest intent. Still, to call it cruel is to see it through human eyes. In truth, it is only another solution, another use of light in the dark. Each bearer of lanterns in the abyss writes a different story with the same ink. Together, they turn the midnight zone into a library of glowing narratives. Some warnings, some seductions, some lies, some truths. We may never learn to read them all, but we can watch and wonder and understand at least this much. That light, wherever it appears, matters. Picture the scene again. You're drifting in a submersible with the floodlights off. Outside the water is black, featureless. Then one by one the lantern bearers appear. A lanternfish glimmers faintly, its belly shining. A dragonfish sweeps its red beam like a secret spotlight. A squid flashes, a jelly pulses, a shrimp sparks and vanishes. And then, in the middle of it all, an anglerfish sways its lure, patient and silent. Each glow is different. Each glow tells its own story. Together they make the abyss less empty, less impossible. Together they prove that darkness is never absolute. And in this community of lights, the anglerfish is not an outlier but a participant, one more actor on a crowded stage. It is famous to us, yes, because its trap is dramatic, its face unsettling, its glow unforgettable. But to the abyss, it is simply one of many, one lantern among countless others, one star in an oceanic sky. From here, the story turns toward the unknown. If so many creatures on Earth's seafloor have solved the problem of darkness with light, what might that mean for life elsewhere in the universe? Could bioluminescence be not just an earthly trick, but a universal one? Could alien oceans, far from the sun, be filled with their own lantern bearers, glowing in ways we have yet to imagine? When people first encounter the anglerfish, it usually isn't in the depths of the ocean. Most of us will never see one alive in its natural world. Instead, we meet it in books, in illustrations, in films, in the stories told about the abyss. And in those places, the anglerfish has become something larger than itself. It is no longer just a small, fragile predator drifting in the dark. It is a symbol, a character, a monster, a metaphor. Our imagination has claimed it as firmly as the abyss has, and in many ways the anglerfish we think we know is not the same as the one that actually exists. Part of this comes from how it looks. With its oversized head, its needle teeth, and its eerie lantern, it fits almost perfectly into the shape of a nightmare. When early specimens were pulled up from the deep and preserved, their bodies collapsed, distorted by the change in pressure. What reached the surface were strange, shrunken husks with mouths gaping far wider than seemed possible. To Victorian scientists and artists, they looked grotesque, and the illustrations they produced emphasized those features. The cavernous mouths, the monstrous teeth, the glowing lure that seemed more like a horror prop than a biological tool. From those first images onward, the anglerfish was framed less as a curious animal and more as a monster lurking in the dark. That reputation only grew as stories of the deep spread. The ocean has always been a place of mystery for humans, a realm we cannot fully see or control. Myths of sea monsters, leviathans and giant serpents fill the imaginations of sailors long before we had submarines or cameras. When real creatures like the anglerfish were finally revealed, they slid neatly into that tradition. Here, at last, was proof that monsters existed in the depths. Not mythical ones, but real ones, just as strange and terrifying. The lantern only made it more haunting. Light in darkness is usually a comfort, but here it became a trap, a lure leading to death. The symbolism was too perfect. In modern times, that image has only been reinforced by popular culture. One of the most famous appearances of the anglerfish came in the animated film Finding Nemo. In that story, when Marlin and Dory swim into the abyss, they are greeted first not by danger, but by a soft, friendly glow. They approach, curious, only for the glow to reveal a gaping mouth full of teeth and a monstrous body waiting to devour them. The scene lasts only minutes, but it left a permanent mark on audiences. For an entire generation, the anglerfish became shorthand for a nightmare with a lantern attached. It was frightening, funny and unforgettable all at once. Documentaries have done something similar, though in a different tone. When submersibles capture footage of anglerfish in their natural environment, the narration often emphasises their strangeness, their horror movie appearance, their role as predators in the dark. The slow sway of the lantern, the sudden snap of the jaws, these are presented as eerie, otherworldly moments. Even when the science is careful, the mood often leans toward the unsettling. It is easy to see why. The anglerfish looks like no other fish we know. It fits perfectly into the role of monster, and our imaginations fill in the rest. But beyond the horror, the anglerfish has also become a metaphor. Writers and thinkers have borrowed it as an image for deception, temptation, and hidden danger. The glowing lure becomes a symbol for things that look inviting but turn out to be traps, an idea as old as storytelling itself. We use phrases like, "too good to be true," and the anglerfish embodies that perfectly. The light is too good to be true. It promises food but delivers death. It is an allegory written into biology, and humans, always hungry for meaning, cannot resist attaching stories to it. At the same time, artists have used the anglerfish in more playful ways. Its strange shape, exaggerated features and swaying lantern make it almost cartoonish. Some illustrations depict it with comically oversized teeth, glowing like a Halloween decoration. Others exaggerate the lantern, turning it into a lamp on a fishing pole, or even into a streetlight dangling above its head. In these images, the anglerfish is not terrifying but funny, an underwater oddball whose weirdness makes it lovable. Once again, our imagination reshapes it to suit our needs. Even in literature and poetry, the anglerfish surfaces as a symbol. Sometimes it stands for loneliness, a creature drifting in endless dark, carrying its own light, because none exists around it. Sometimes it represents danger disguised as beauty. Sometimes it represents adaptation, resilience, the idea that even in the harshest conditions life finds a way. Few animals carry so many layers of metaphor while being so little known in reality. That is the irony. The anglerfish has become iconic not because we see it often, but because it lives in a place almost none of us will ever visit. Its absence in our daily lives makes it easy to fill with meaning. It is also worth noting how the anglerfish's image has been shaped by our fear of the unknown. The abyss is one of the last great frontiers on Earth, a place less explored than the surface of the moon. When we imagine it, we project our anxieties onto it. Fear of darkness, fear of emptiness, fear of what hides where we cannot see. The anglerfish, with its eerie glow and monstrous mouth, becomes the perfect vessel for those fears. It is the face we give to the abyss, the embodiment of everything we imagine might be waiting in the dark. And yet, when scientists observe these creatures carefully, when they describe their soft bodies, their patient strategies, their delicate symbiosis with bacteria, a different picture emerges. The real anglerfish is not a monster at all. It is fragile, efficient, and strangely elegant in its own way. It is not a horror story, but a survival story. What we see as grotesque is simply adaptation. What we see as monstrous is simply ordinary life in the abyss. Our imagination has painted it with fear because fear is the easiest colour to use. But the reality is subtler, more fascinating, and, in some ways, more beautiful. That gap between the anglerfish in our imagination and the anglerfish in reality is part of why it fascinates us so much. It exists in two worlds at once, the real abyss where it waits patiently with its lantern, and the world of our stories, where it becomes everything from nightmare to metaphor. Few animals occupy such a space. Sharks may frighten us, but we also see them every summer on beaches. Wolves may inspire stories, but they are also visible in forests and mountains. The anglerfish, by contrast, is almost never seen in person. It is a ghost of the deep, half-real, half-imagined, living as much in our minds as in the ocean. And perhaps that is fitting. For an animal whose life revolves around illusion, a light that is not food, a promise that is a trap, it makes sense that our perception of it is also an illusion. We imagine it as a monster when it is not. We imagine it as a symbol when it is simply surviving. The anglerfish tricks its prey into approaching, and in a way it tricks us too. We come closer, drawn by its glow in stories and pictures, and what we find is not what we expected. So the next time you think of the anglerfish, remember both versions. Remember the nightmare of Finding Nemo, the horror of illustrations, the symbol of temptation. But also remember the fragile creature drifting in the dark, soft-bodied, patient, carrying borrowed light from bacteria, a fish that looks strange only because it lives where we cannot. Both are real, in their own ways, both matter. The anglerfish in our imagination tells us about ourselves, our fears and metaphors. The anglerfish in reality tells us about life, adaptation, and survival at the edge of the impossible. And as we hold both in our minds, we can move from fear to wonder, seeing not a monster but a marvel. That shift from fright to fascination is the next step in the story. When we first meet the anglerfish, either in stories or on a screen, it usually arrives wrapped in fear. Its teeth are exaggerated, its face twisted into something grotesque, its lantern a symbol of deception. The first instinct is to recoil, to laugh nervously, to see it as a monster rather than an animal. But the longer we linger with it, the more those feelings begin to change. Slowly, the image of a nightmare shifts into something else, something far more interesting. Fear gives way to curiosity, and curiosity turns into wonder. That shift is not unique to the anglerfish. Many creatures once branded as terrifying become fascinating once we understand them better. Bats, for example, were once symbols of darkness and evil, yet now we know them as intricate navigators of the night sky, pollinators of plants, controllers of insect populations. Sharks were once painted as mindless killers, but research has revealed them as intelligent, graceful, and essential to ocean ecosystems. Spiders, often hated for their appearance, build webs of such complexity that engineers study their silk. Time and knowledge have a way of turning monsters into marvels. The anglerfish is following that same path. At first, we see only the surface details, the gaping mouth, the long teeth, the eerie glow. They look threatening because we interpret them through our own lens. Teeth are weapons. Glow in the dark is unsettling. A body so disproportionate looks unnatural. But step back, ask why, and the picture changes. Those teeth are not there to terrify, but to hold prey in place. The glow is not evil, but cooperation with bacteria. The strange body shape is not a mistake, but an adaptation to pressure, scarcity, and darkness. Each feature that once looked monstrous begins to make sense. It may still look strange, but it no longer looks wrong. Fear fades further when we realize how fragile these creatures truly are. An anglerfish brought to the surface often falls apart, its body too delicate to survive outside the crushing pressure of the abyss. Its flesh is soft, its bones light, its shape held together by the very environment we find so hostile. It is not a monster built for destruction. It is a ghost, a fragile invention of a specific world, unable to survive in ours. That vulnerability strips away much of the menace we first imagine. A monster is something that invades, threatens, endures anywhere. The anglerfish can only exist in its own realm. That makes it less a threat and more a wonder, a specialist so finely tuned to its environment that it could live nowhere else. There is also wonder in the patience it embodies. Many predators rely on speed, strength, or aggression. The anglerfish does the opposite. It waits, still and silent, for hours or days if necessary. It spends energy carefully, never wasting it. Its success lies not in violence but in timing. That is a strategy we rarely admire because we are drawn to stories of action. But in the abyss, patience is brilliance. The anglerfish thrives not because it fights harder, but because it waits longer. There is something admirable in that restraint, in the way it trusts its environment to deliver what it needs. The lantern itself, once a symbol of fear, becomes a symbol of ingenuity the more we learn. At first we imagine it as sinister, a light leading prey to their doom. But beneath that image is something far more remarkable. The light is not produced by the fish at all. It is produced by bacteria, tiny organisms living inside the lure. The anglerfish builds a home for them, feeds them, and in return they shine. That partnership is extraordinary, a marriage of two species that could not be more different. What looked like trickery becomes collaboration. What looked like deception becomes coexistence. The lantern stops being a horror prop and becomes a biological wonder, one of the most unusual partnerships in the natural world. Even reproduction, which seems so bizarre and unsettling at first, carries its own form of wonder. The male's fusion with the female is easy to frame as grotesque, a loss of individuality, a parasite consuming its host. But looked at differently, it is an astonishing solution to an impossible problem. In an environment where mates may never meet, where distances are endless and darkness unbroken, permanent fusion ensures survival. It is extreme, yes, but it is effective. It shows just how far life can bend when pressed against the limits of possibility. What at first seems horrifying reveals itself as another face of ingenuity. This transformation from fear to wonder is really a change in perspective. When we see only the surface, the anglerfish is a nightmare. When we ask why, it becomes a marvel. Fear is shallow. Wonder is deep. The abyss teaches us this again and again. And perhaps this is why the anglerfish captivates us so much. It embodies the strangeness of a world we do not know, but it also reminds us that strangeness is not the same as monstrosity. The deep sea is filled with creatures that look alien to our eyes: transparent shrimp, gelatinous jellies, fish with tubular eyes that gaze upward through their skulls. All of them look unsettling at first, but when you learn their stories, when you understand the problems they have solved and the lives they have carved out in impossibility, the fear fades. What remains is awe. The anglerfish is the perfect guide for this shift because it begins so firmly in the realm of fear. Teeth, jaws, glowing lure. Everything about it feels like it was designed to scare. That makes the wonder more powerful when it finally arrives. To go from seeing it as a monster to seeing it as a marvel is a transformation not just of perception, but of ourselves. It shows us how curiosity can rewrite fear, how knowledge can soften instinct, how wonder can replace dread. There is also a broader lesson here, one that stretches beyond the anglerfish. We often treat the unfamiliar with fear. Strange faces, strange ideas, strange environments. Our first instinct is to recoil, to label them as threats. But if we stay, if we linger, if we ask why, we find that fear is often misplaced. The unfamiliar is not necessarily dangerous, it is simply unknown. The anglerfish is a reminder of this truth. It looks terrifying until you learn its story. Then it looks fragile, ingenious, fascinating. Then it looks wonderful. Picture it once more in the abyss. A small glow sways in the dark, soft and inviting. Prey approaches, jaws open, teeth flash. To its prey, the anglerfish is still death. But to us, watching from the outside, it is a miracle of patience, adaptation and partnership. It is not a monster at all. It is proof that life can find a way even in the most impossible places. That shift from fear to wonder is the real gift it gives us. And as we carry that gift forward, the story grows larger. The anglerfish is not just about itself. It is about the abyss as a whole, about how extreme environments force life into creativity, about how the edges of possibility reveal the ingenuity of evolution. The next step, then, is to look at the abyss itself as a mirror, showing us not only the creatures that live there, but the creativity of life itself. The abyss feels like the farthest place from us. It is black where our world is bright, silent where our world is filled with sound, crushing where our world feels open. To us it seems alien, a hostile void where nothing should survive, and yet, the more we look at it, the more it reflects truths about life itself. The abyss becomes not just a frontier of the ocean, but a mirror, showing us the ingenuity of survival, the patience of adaptation, and the creativity of evolution. When we stare into it, we do not just see strange creatures like the anglerfish. We see echoes of ourselves, reminders of what it means to exist in any environment. At first glance, the abyss looks barren. No plants grow there. No sunlight penetrates. The sea floor is covered in fine silt, featureless, stretching for miles. But watch closely, and the illusion breaks. The darkness fills with glimmers of light, lanternfish flashing as they migrate, jellyfish pulsing in silent spirals, squid sending coded signals across their bodies. The void is not empty. It is crowded with lives shaped by the same forces that shaped us: scarcity, pressure, the need to eat, the need to reproduce. The abyss is strange, but it is not separate. It follows the same rules as every ecosystem, only bent into unfamiliar forms. The anglerfish embodies this reflection perfectly. On the surface, we see a monster with a lantern. Look deeper, and we see patience, cooperation, fragility, ingenuity. That is not alien. That is what life always does. It bends, it adapts, it makes do. We build tools, the anglerfish builds a lure. We depend on communities, the anglerfish depends on bacteria. We endure in environments by reshaping them, and so does it. When we strip away the fear and novelty, the anglerfish stops looking like an alien and starts looking like us in another form. The abyss also mirrors resilience. On land, when we imagine harshness, we think of deserts or frozen tundras. But the abyss is harsher still, colder, darker, more crushing. And yet, it is full of life. If resilience means the ability to continue, then nothing is more resilient than these creatures. They do not resist the impossible, they embody it. Their existence shows us that limits are not walls but doorways. What we think of as unlivable becomes ordinary with the right adaptations. That lesson is not confined to the ocean, it is universal. We too have survived by bending, by finding ways to live in places once thought unlivable. The abyss is not an exception to life's creativity, it is a mirror of it. It also reflects our own relationship with the unknown. For centuries, the deep sea terrified us. Sailors imagined monsters lurking below, jaws waiting to swallow ships. Even today, when we know more, we still project fear onto it. We call it inhospitable, alien, impossible. But when we actually see it, when cameras descend, when lights go out, when natural bioluminescence fills the frame, we are struck not by fear, but by awe. That is a mirror of how we respond to any unknown. First fear, then wonder, then understanding. The abyss is simply the most dramatic version of that cycle. And then there is the question of illusion. The abyss is full of deception, lures that look like food, lights that hide instead of reveal, signals that mean one thing to one species and something else to another. To us, this looks like trickery, but isn't illusion part of every ecosystem? On land, butterflies mimic poisonous species, plants disguise themselves as rocks, owls blend into bark. The abyss simply exaggerates it, makes it luminous, puts it on a stage of darkness where every flicker is visible. In that way, it reflects something broader about life. Survival is often about appearances, about convincing others of something that is not quite true. The abyss shows us the same rules, but turned up to their highest contrast. Perhaps the deepest reflection the abyss gives us is about connection. None of its creatures live alone. Not really. The anglerfish glows only because of bacteria. Lanternfish vanish only because of their coordinated schools. Even giant squid, solitary hunters, are part of an invisible web of prey and predator stretching across thousands of meters. Connection is everywhere, even here, even in a place that seems like endless emptiness. That mirrors us too. We like to imagine ourselves as individuals, but in truth, we survive through connections, to microbes, to ecosystems, to one another. The abyss, in its strange way, reminds us that survival is never solitary. There is also humility in this mirror. For all our technology, our lights, our maps, we still know very little about the abyss. It remains one of the least explored places on Earth, more mysterious than the surface of Mars. Every time a submersible descends, it finds something new, a species unseen, a behaviour unrecorded, a glow unexplained. The abyss reflects back our ignorance, reminding us how much we do not know. And in that ignorance is a gift. Wonder remains possible. Not everything is mapped. Not everything is explained. There are still mysteries waiting in the dark. The anglerfish's lantern is one of those mysteries. We understand parts of it, the bacteria, the symbiosis, the chemistry, but not all. We do not know exactly how the bacteria find their way into the lure, or how the fish filters them, or whether it can control the glow consciously. The abyss gives us answers and withholds others, forcing us to accept both knowledge and mystery at once. That too is a mirror. Our own lives are a mix of what we understand and what we do not, what we can explain and what we must simply accept. The abyss reflects that balance, showing us that wonder often lies not in certainty but in questions. Imagine floating there yourself, in a submersible with the lights turned off. At first, the darkness feels absolute, almost suffocating. Then, slowly, the sparks appear. A lanternfish glimmers and disappears. A squid flashes once and fades. A jelly pulses like a ghost. And somewhere ahead, an anglerfish sways its lantern, waiting in silence. In that moment, you realize the abyss is not alien. It is familiar. It is strange, yes, but it speaks the same language as life everywhere. Adaptation, survival, connection. It is not a monster's lair. It is a mirror showing us truths we forget when surrounded by light and comfort. And maybe that is why we're drawn to it. The abyss reflects back not just life's resilience, but our own desire to look into the unknown and see meaning. It tells us that what looks impossible is not, that what feels terrifying can become beautiful, that what seems empty can be full. The anglerfish, glowing in the dark, is not just a curiosity of evolution. It is a reminder that even in the darkest places, life writes stories worth telling. As we leave this reflection behind, the next step feels almost inevitable. If the abyss mirrors life's creativity, then the anglerfish's lantern itself becomes more than a trick or a tool. It becomes a lesson, a symbol, something that teaches us not just about fish and bacteria, but about ourselves. What exactly does that lantern teach us? That is where our journey leads next. The anglerfish's lantern is one of those details in nature that seems small at first, almost a curiosity. But the longer you think about it, the more it begins to unfold into something larger. It is not just a bulb glowing above a fish's mouth. It is a relationship between species, a survival strategy, a deception, a signal, and in its own way, a message. When we look at it, we are not only seeing how the anglerfish survives in the abyss, we are also seeing what light itself means in the darkest places, and what that can teach us about life more broadly. The lantern is a tool, yes, but it is also a teacher, and its lessons reach further than we might expect. The first lesson is about cooperation. At its core, the lantern is not something the fish built on its own. The anglerfish cannot make light. The glow comes from bacteria that have been welcomed into its body, housed, and fed. The fish and the bacteria are inseparable. Neither could shine alone. Together they create something that defines them both. That is cooperation in its purest form, not kindness, not altruism, but survival through partnership. It reminds us that life is rarely solitary. Every creature, even those that look most independent, depends on others in ways large and small. We humans depend on microbes in our guts, on plants that produce oxygen, on pollinators that carry seeds. The anglerfish depends on its bacteria. Cooperation is not an exception, it is the rule. The lantern also teaches us about illusion. To its prey, the glow looks like food. It is small, enticing, harmless. But it is not what it seems. It is a trap. That is a lesson in appearances, a reminder that not everything bright is good, not everything that shines is safe. In the abyss, this is survival. In our own world, the lesson feels just as true. We are surrounded by lures of our own, advertisements, temptations, promises that look too good. Like the anglerfish's prey, we are drawn to lights that turn out to be traps. The lantern shows us how powerful illusions can be, how easily hunger or curiosity can override caution. It is a survival tool for the fish, but for us it becomes a metaphor, a glowing reminder to question what draws us in. Another lesson lies in patience. The anglerfish does not chase. It does not expend energy in frantic pursuit. It waits, lantern swaying gently, jaws open but still. It may wait hours, days, even longer. That patience is not weakness. It is strategy. In the abyss, wasting energy means death. Efficiency matters more than speed. The lantern teaches us that sometimes survival is not about constant motion, but about stillness, about trusting that opportunities will come if we are prepared. It is not a lesson we like to hear. We live in a world that rewards speed, urgency, activity. But in the dark, where resources are scarce, patience is the greatest strength. The anglerfish embodies that truth, and its lantern is the symbol of waiting well. The lantern also carries a lesson in fragility. It looks eerie, powerful, unyielding. But in reality, the fish is soft, its body fragile, unable to survive outside its own narrow environment. The lantern glows brilliantly in the abyss, but if the fish is hauled to the surface, its tissues collapse, the bacteria die, the light goes out. The glow is not eternal. It depends on delicate conditions, on balance. That fragility reminds us that even the most extraordinary adaptations exist within limits. Life flourishes not by conquering every environment, but by fitting into one precisely. The lantern works in the abyss and nowhere else. The lesson is humility. Strength is always contextual. What seems powerful in one place may be powerless in another. There is also wonder in the fact that the lantern exists at all. Light in the ocean is not inevitable. Sunlight does not reach these depths. And yet life found a way to create its own. That teaches us something about resilience. In darkness, life does not surrender. It invents light. It does not wait for conditions to change. It changes itself to fit conditions. That is not just a story about a fish. It is a story about the creativity of evolution, about the ability of life to turn scarcity into opportunity, to turn impossibility into possibility. The lantern is proof that even in the bleakest places solutions can appear. It also teaches us about perspective. To the prey, the lantern is danger disguised as opportunity. To the fish, it is survival disguised as patience. To the bacteria, it is home disguised as necessity. To us, it is all of these and more. A curiosity, a metaphor, a reminder. The same glow means different things depending on where you stand. That is a lesson worth carrying. The world is full of signals, but their meaning shifts depending on who is watching. The lantern is not fixed in its story. It is layered, interpreted differently by fish, by bacteria, by humans. Perspective changes everything. And perhaps the most profound lesson is that beauty and terror are not opposites. The anglerfish's lantern frightens us at first because it belongs to a predator, because it hides teeth, because it is tied to death. But the more we learn, the more beautiful it becomes. Its chemistry is elegant, its partnership with bacteria remarkable, its glow haunting. It is both frightening and beautiful at the same time. The lantern teaches us that things can be more than one thing at once, that fear and wonder often live side by side. The abyss is full of such paradoxes. The anglerfish's glow is just the most visible. Picture it now as you might if you were there in the abyss. The darkness presses in from all sides. The silence is complete. Then, ahead, a single light sways gently. A soft point of glow in the black. If you were a small fish, you would feel hunger and curiosity, and you might swim closer. If you were the anglerfish, you would feel patience, the calm certainty that eventually something will approach. If you were us, watching from the outside, you would feel awe, seeing not just a fish, but an entire story condensed into a flicker. That is what the lantern teaches. That meaning is not in the light itself, but in how we see it. The anglerfish's lantern is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because it is simply another adaptation, the result of trial and error, the slow work of evolution. Extraordinary because it carries so much meaning, not just for the fish, but for us. It teaches us about cooperation, illusion, patience, fragility, resilience, perspective, paradox. It teaches us that life, no matter how strange, no matter how dark its environment, finds a way to shine. And as we carry those lessons with us, the story begins to circle back. The lantern is not just about the fish. It is about us too. It shows us how to think about darkness, how to see light, how to shift from fear to wonder. It reminds us that survival is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, borrowed, fragile, glowing softly in places where nothing should glow at all. That glow is both the anglerfish's tool and our teacher. From here, the journey begins to settle. We have followed the anglerfish through darkness, patience, illusion, romance, fragility, contradiction and wonder. The lantern has taught us much, but the story is not quite finished. There is one last step, a return to ourselves. After all, the lantern is not just out there in the abyss. It is also here, in our imagination, in our reflection, in the way we carry its glow with us when the story ends, and that gentle closing glow is where we turn next. We've drifted a long way together through this story, starting from the first spark of curiosity about a strange little fish with a lantern on its head, and now arriving at the end of the journey, a place that feels softer, calmer, more familiar, even though we're still surrounded by darkness. By now, the anglerfish no longer feels like a monster hiding in the abyss. It feels like a companion, a guide through a world we rarely think about, a creature that carries its own small light where no other light exists. And as we close, I want you to hold on to that glow, not as something strange and distant, but as something gentle you can carry with you wherever you are. Think back to how this began. We started with a single question. How could the abyss create a living light bulb? It sounded absurd, almost comical. A fish with a lamp on its head? Surely that belongs in cartoons, in the imagination, not in reality. But reality surprised us, as it always does. We discovered bacteria glowing inside a pouch of flesh, a spine transformed into a fishing rod, a trap woven out of patience and illusion. Each detail seemed stranger than the last, and yet, the more we looked, the more it all began to make sense. What looked at first like nonsense revealed itself as elegance. What looked like horror became wonder. That is the magic of curiosity. It turns fear into fascination, it turns confusion into clarity, and it turns darkness into light. The anglerfish's lantern has been with us through every part of this story. At times it was a lure, a deception that tricked prey into jaws lined with teeth. At times it was a collaboration, a partnership between fish and bacteria, a symbol of cooperation hidden inside what looked like menace. At times it was a metaphor, reminding us of illusions in our own lives, the way we are drawn to lights that promise too much. And at times it was simply beautiful, a glow in the dark ocean, improbable and yet perfectly real. Through it all, the lantern was never just a bulb. It was a reminder that even in the deepest dark, light can appear in forms we never expect. That is a lesson worth carrying beyond the ocean, because all of us at some point find ourselves in darkness. Not literal darkness, but the kind where you feel lost, where the path forward is unclear, where comfort feels distant. In those moments, the anglerfish's lantern becomes more than a scientific curiosity. It becomes a metaphor for resilience. It says, light can exist even here. It may not be bright, it may not be much, but it is enough. A small glow in the right place can make all the difference. That is as true for us as it is for a fish drifting in the abyss. And maybe that is why this story has felt so soothing. Because it isn't just about a fish, it's about the way life solves problems, the way survival finds a path even in impossibility, the way light appears in unexpected places. When you picture the anglerfish now, picture not a monster but a teacher. Its teeth may still be sharp, its body may still be strange, but its glow carries meaning. It carries the lesson that fear is often the first step toward wonder, and that the unknown can turn into the unforgettable if you stay long enough to see it fully. We also talked about how the anglerfish has been imagined, in myths, in movies, in art. To some it was a monster, to others a symbol, to still others a joke. But the truth is quieter. The anglerfish is not trying to be anything but itself. It drifts in stillness, lantern swaying, jaws waiting. It is patient, efficient, and fragile. Its glow is not for us, but we've borrowed it anyway, woven it into our stories, our fears, our metaphors. In a way, the anglerfish has given us a gift without even knowing it. It has given us an image of light in darkness, an image we can use in our own ways, whether to frighten, to inspire, or to comfort. As we settle here at the end, I want to bring the story back to you. Think about where you are right now. Maybe you're lying down, drifting towards sleep, letting the words settle into quiet. Maybe you're listening on a walk, letting the rhythm of steps carry the story with you. Maybe you're simply curious, pausing in your day to learn something new. Wherever you are, this story has met you there. And that's its own kind of lantern, a glow connecting two distant places. One voice carried across silence, one listener drawing closer. In its own way, this moment mirrors the abyss. The darkness is vast, but even a small glow creates connection. The anglerfish's lantern also leaves us with humility. We have explained so much of it, the bacteria, the chemistry, the evolution, but some parts remain unknown. We still don't know exactly how the bacteria find their way to the lure. We still don't know how much control the fish has over the glow. We still don't know the full history of how such a bizarre adaptation came to be. That mystery is important. It reminds us that not everything has to be solved to be meaningful. Sometimes it's enough to sit with the unknown, to let it shine without needing to capture it fully. That is another lesson of the lantern, that mystery is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of wonder. So now, at the close, imagine once more the scene we've carried throughout this story. The abyss, black and endless. A stillness so complete it feels eternal. And in that stillness, a single glow swaying gently. Patient, soft, steady. That glow belongs to the anglerfish, yes, but in this moment it belongs to you as well. Carry it with you, as a reminder that even the darkest places are never truly without light. Carry it as a reminder that fear can turn into curiosity, that strangeness can turn into beauty, that impossibility can turn into survival. Carry it as your own lantern, small but steady, something to guide you through whatever darkness you face. And if this story has brought you even a little comfort, if it has felt like a glow in your own night, then let that be its final gift. A strange fish from the abyss has reminded us of something simple but profound. Light matters most where darkness is deepest. The anglerfish carries that truth in its lantern. Now so do we. Thank you for drifting with me all the way here. If you found this journey soothing, or if you'd like to wander again into other mysteries, you can always linger with this channel a little longer. But for now, let the lantern's glow fade gently in your mind, and let the darkness around it feel less empty, less frightening, more like a place where wonder quietly waits. Good night, and may you carry a gentle glow of your own.